Chapter 239. Katanov's voice was not loud, but it was clear enough. In terms of eloquence, Tani, who had been in social circles and among women since he was a child, could beat him by more than 10 streets. But at this moment, in the face of the miracle-like world around him, Tani felt as if his tongue had been rooted, and he couldn't say a word. He opened his mouth awkwardly for a long time, not knowing what to say. Only then did he feel the paleness of words in front of the facts. They had gone deep into the base of the Communist Alliance, and they were surrounded by a world beyond their imagination. The soft grass was spread under their feet, the flowering trees were entwined around them, and the fresh fragrance of soil, flowers, and sunshine in the air was relaxing. This place was not like the center of the city, but more like the nature closest to human beings. Only by seeing the technological products that were integrated with the plants like art and the magical buildings that blended into the surrounding environment could people realize that this was a city from the future. We are walking the same path. Although you are ahead of us, that doesn't mean you can laugh at us. We just haven't gone there yet. Captain America looked at Katanov without showing any weakness. You just have a little more time. Well said. Katanov smiled and extended his hand in invitation. Then join us. As a human being, integrate into this glorious era. Forget all the rules you established in the past era. Accept this great and glorious era, and enjoy the true freedom of human beings. Your identity, your status, and all the imprints of your past will lose most of their meaning, leaving only the most core things. Wisdom, courage, noble character, persistent faith, and firm will. Apart from that, you will have nothing. Katanov looked into Captain America's eyes as if asking him, "Do you dare?" People have the right to choose freely. Since I have chosen to stand with them, I will defend everything to the end. My force field will always be firm, and my shield will always fight to protect them. Anyone who violates their choice, whether it is a criminal, an alien invader, or anyone else, even if it is our government, I will fight them to the end. Obviously, it's impossible for me to abandon Stark Industries with just a few words. Tani said seriously, I'm only complete when I'm with my company. This has nothing to do with money, power, or anything else. It's a part of me. It's where my dreams lie. It's as inseparable as this body of steel. When I say have nothing, I don't mean lose everything. On the contrary, I mean have everything. Katanov shook his head. Material, everything you can imagine, everything you can have it. Because it is infinite, because it is senseless. Apart from your essence, the things that make you human, everything else would be like air, yours to possess, but it would be meaningless. Try to imagine that you are in a small space where you are suffocating. They killed each other for the slightest bit of oxygen, greedily occupying that bit of resources. Use all shameless, despicable, and cruel means to possess her. Revealing the essence of the problem, Katanov seemed to have pulled out all the thoughts of the Avengers, those little secrets in the dark complex. Dusty, not-so-heroic things were pulled out from the depths of their thoughts, from under the skin of morality. Captain America and Tani couldn't help but feel a sense of irritation and instinctively become angry with Katanov. The heroes of the Avengers quickly got rid of this feeling. They knew it wasn't a good performance, but the feeling of being forced to face something they didn't want to face still made them feel embarrassed. Katanov's words were like a blade, cutting open the surface of the prosperous era on Earth that the Avengers were proud of, revealing the paleness and emptiness behind it. Now we're going to open the window. The despicableness and shamelessness that you insist on are meaningless. What once allowed you to survive and gave you status is now just proof of your despicableness. Everything that was once greedy for possession. Katanov made a gesture of being blown away by the wind. If the despicableness of possession is your position, if the greed that allowed you to survive is your faith, then I can tell you that the darkness has passed and the dawn is coming. If you insist, then I can only tell you, your position is meaningless. Your faith is not worth mentioning. Enough. Captain America interrupted him angrily. You are not qualified to talk about my faith. You are too far away from it, and I am too close to it. I have been sleeping since World War II, but I can still see it today. That spirit is shining. It has shone for a century, created an era, and will inevitably continue to exist. I will use my life to guard and practice it. Captain America raised a shield and said in the most resolute manner, I swear to fight for freedom. Tawny also placed his hand on Captain America's shield and said with the same sincerity, This time, I completely agree with you. I swear to fight for the United States, for the freedom of mankind. For the freedom of mankind. Hulk, no. Now it should be Dr. Bruce. Also placed his huge right hand on the back of Stark's hand and said solemnly. The three of them looked at each other. Their eyes were very firm, and they all had the determination to give everything they had. Count me in, my friends from Earth. Thor laughed and put his right fist on the shield. Asgard is willing to fight for freedom. Loki hesitated for a moment and tried to put his hand on the shield, but he was glared at by several people. He raised his palms innocently, indicating that he had no malice, and then slowly stepped back to stand next to Kadanoff. I'm also willing to fight for freedom, but I will always stand on the winning side. Hawkeye silently added his hand. Only Black Widow was left among the Avengers. Everyone looked at her, especially Bruce. He looked at her with eyes full of expectation, but Black Widow's silence scared them. Natasha, we are waiting for you, Bruce said anxiously, but Black Widow was unmoved. Everyone had a bad feeling in their hearts. Tawny tried to make a joke. Putting my hand together with three men makes me feel awkward. Come on, Natalie, I can't wait. But the Black Widow still maintained a puzzling silence, and a strange atmosphere suddenly spread between them. Although she did not make a sound, but the silence had already explained her choice. Sorry, Black Widow waved her hand. Why? Bruce asked desperately. The United States is your country, but you are with us. We are family, partners. You are a real hero, and we know how much you have done for this country. Bruce said excitedly. But that is because my country is dead. Black Widow roared. My soul has no support, and it wanders at will. Without it, everything I do is meaningless. I feel disgusted by the monster who stood up from the corpse of my country, so I can only choose for myself. It's not like that. Bruce was about to lose his mind. He looked at the woman in front of him in despair. You love us. There's a real bond between you and me, sorry. Black Widow slowly stepped back and stood with Kadanoff. She suppressed her emotions, but her voice was already sobbing. She was sorry. It was a strong nasal sound. But I have faith. Black Widow said this sentence very softly. If it were not for the fact that everyone present was not an ordinary person, no one would have heard it. This sentence made Bruce feel like he was struck by lightning. Tawny and Captain America also revealed shocked expressions. They had never been as shocked as this moment in their lives. Everyone had an expression of disbelief on their faces. I see a building. A narrow door in front of it is wide open. Behind the door is a thick, dark fog. Outside the high threshold stood a girl, a Russian girl. Natalie read Turgenev's prose in a low voice. Kadanoff also softly read with her. The wind blew through the thick fog, and there was a chill coming from the depths of the building. At the same time, there was a slow, heavy voice asking, what do you want to do in this threshold? Do you know what is waiting for you inside? I know, the girl replied. Cold, hunger, hate, ridicule, contempt, insult, prison, disease, even death. I know. Estranged from people, completely alone. I know. I am ready. I am willing to endure all the pain, all the blows. Not only your enemy, even your relatives and friends will give you this kind of pain, this kind of blow. Yes, even if they give me these, I have to endure it. Good. Are you also ready to sacrifice? Yes. This is a nameless sacrifice. You will die, and no one knows, and no one will revere you. I don't want to be remembered. I don't want to be pitied. I don't want fame. Are you willing to commit crimes? The girl lowered her head. I am also willing to commit crimes. The voice inside paused for a moment, and then said these words. Do you know that in the future, when you are in trouble, you will deny this belief of yours? You will think that you have wasted your youth for nothing? I know that too. I only ask you to let me in. Come in. The girl stepped over the threshold. A thick curtain was immediately lowered. Fool! Someone sneered from behind. A saint, came the reply from somewhere. That's me, said Natalie. She raised her head, and her face was already radiant. Seeing such a smile, Bruce felt that this was Natalie with soul. It was such a brilliant, sincere, and heartfelt smile that even made everything around her pale in comparison. It was as if Natalie's soul had descended from heaven just a moment ago, and at this moment, Natalie's soul had descended from heaven. Bruce was momentarily lost. Tawny and Rogers watched sadly as Natalie moved further and further away from them. Her voice came from the other side. Arise, slave of cold and hunger. Arise, sufferer of the world. My blood is boiling, fight for the truth. For the first time, they knew that Natalie could sing, and that she could sing so beautifully. In the song, under the bright sunshine, the Avengers split for the first time. An Avenger stood against her companions forever, willing to draw her sword against her former comrades for the sake of her beliefs and ideals, willing to sacrifice everything for justice and beauty. Chapter 240. Sunlight passed through the gaps in the clouds, dividing the space into two worlds of light and darkness. The Avengers stood in the shadows, and the people opposite them looked a little dazzling. Tawny tilted his head and squinted to barely see them. Natalie had recovered from her excitement and loss of control. Her expression was tranquil now, and there was even a sense of relief in the corners of her mouth. When she saw Tawny's gaze, she even had the mood to kiss him and mouth to him. The next time we meet, we won't be friends. Stark. Why? Tawny said to her in his heart. But in the end, he didn't ask this question. Just like that, the two sides gradually drifted apart, and the Avengers drew a deep rift between them and the Communist Alliance with the most resolute attitude. On the contrary, Kadanoff, who had always been hostile to them, seemed to not care, or rather, he was quite confident. Tawny could feel this arrogance. It was as if he were a transmigrator standing upstream in history and watching their rotting corpses. The firm belief that the world would be changed, that the persistence of the Avengers would decay, was unbearably arrogant. Tawny could even imagine Kadanoff saying to them in his usual flat tone, "We don't care about your persistence," because time, the world, and the truth were all on their side. The thought of that scene made him feel deep sorrow and anger. What made him even sadder was that he couldn't imagine the world developing in that direction. Would there still be any meaning to his existence? As a hero, his values and the meaning of his existence would be denied. In history, he was like a character in a stage play, just a part in life. No one would care about a superhero, Iron Man. They would only remember a billionaire, playboy, Avenger, and Superman, Tony Stark. A sudden invasion by the Chitauri interrupted the Avengers' contact with the Communist Alliance. Kadanoff also wanted to participate in the war, and Natalie also asked to go to the battlefield, even if it was just as a paramedic. According to Kadanoff, such attacks didn't stop for a day, usually once every 3 hours. Sometimes it happened 3 times an hour. From the terrifying battles with planets and galaxies as coordinates and space battleships as units, to the infiltration and killing within the atmosphere as combat radius, and the infiltration and killing of small teams as combat units, at every moment. Wars happen all the time. The Avengers were allowed to watch the battle. Even though they had their differences, they were still treated with a certain degree of courtesy in this human-dominated regime. They were not restricted in their freedom, and they were not monitored. This kind of confidence reminded Steve of America during World War II. They were just like us back then. North Koreans, China, Filipinos, and Indians. All the countries that have not been liberated, whatever their attitude towards the United States, as long as they are against fascism, we will welcome them. Are you saying that compared to the Chitauris, we are humans, so we are treated better? Dr. Bruce curled up in a small room, his tone not very good. Hulk is at least twice as tall as Tawny and the others, and he looks quite uncomfortable in a building prepared for humans. Also, Natalie's departure had left him in a bad mood. If it weren't for the professor's teaching and help, the Hulk would have gone crazy. That's not the point. Captain America looked at the fleet taking off outside the space prism and replied in a trance. The point is that kind of confidence, the confidence of the Golden Age. Just like the United States before the victory of World War II. We believe that victory will belong to us. We believe that our army is unstoppable. No matter how strong evil is, justice will prevail in the end, and we represent justice. We tolerate all those who disagree, those who are wary of us, as long as they are not evil. At that time, whether the evil red axis wins in China or Eastern Europe falls to communism, we don't care. We welcome them all the same because God is with us. But this time, God will not be with the atheists. Tani stood up and said maliciously. He motioned everyone to look at him. Guys, you don't think we will be friendly with them forever, do you? Whether we will become enemies with them or not, we will not be friends. We are all humans. Captain America said helplessly. Stark said sarcastically. The Nazis and we are all humans too. During the Cold War, we almost had a world war with them, and now there will be no peace. It will be nothing more than a Cold War or a more powerful Iron Curtain. Don't forget, the cornerstone of maintaining world peace, the balance of terror under nuclear deterrence, has disappeared. They can destroy us at any time, wipe out the entire United States and even the Earth. Stark, don't be crazy. Tani's words were clearly not to Captain America's liking. He stood up, looked at Tani, and said seriously, "Freedom is more important than my life, and so is peace. If you adopt such a confrontational mindset, I think they will definitely not lose. Don't fantasize about victory, Tani. I am pursuing peace. There will only be peace when there is a balance of power. Otherwise, just like what we did to the Indians, the civilized people here will also destroy our backward and barbaric elements," Tani said seriously. "I love this country, so I want to protect it. When the world was peaceful, no one liked weapons, but now, I think it is time for Stark to restart the weapons industry. Your actions are too dangerous, Stark. It is this world that is too dangerous," Tani retorted, not showing any weakness. "You will drag the United States into the abyss. If you believe that we are right, why don't you dare to wait for time to prove it? Or do you not believe in what you stand for? What makes you stand with us is not your ideals, but your position. The victory of ideals is not in how powerful they are, but in how many people support them." Bruce couldn't help but refute. "We will win, just like when the former Soviet Union fell. Humanity will choose us. The biggest enemy of the Communist Alliance is their people, as long as they are willing to believe in us. Because they did not lie to me, so I know." Tani opened his hands, tilted his head, and said, "I know more about politics than you do. It is useless. There is nothing that cannot be distorted, and there is nothing that cannot be discredited. Did you know that Washington likes to pull out black people's teeth? I even have a set of his false teeth. Who was Lincoln's killer? Do you know? Kennedy? And Marilyn Monroe? She was also murdered by a big consortium?" Bruce asked reflexively. As soon as he finished speaking, he realized that he had made a slip of the tongue. He turned his head and didn't dare to look at Tani. "You see, you all know, you're just playing dumb. What determines the world is material, and what determines the society is the economy and strength. Sometimes, you have to be unconventional, or you won't even have a chance in the future. This is the biggest lesson I have learned in the business world." Tani glanced at the faces of his companions. Steve and Bruce's firm opposition disappointed him. Fortunately, Hawkeye and Thor were more supportive of him. Thor couldn't help but nod, then turned to look at Tani and said, "Well said, but how do you maintain that terrifying balance?" A three-dimensional design appeared in Thor's palm. He stared at the core of the complex mechanical drawing, which was the projection of the 6 gems. Thor was stunned when the gems appeared. He looked at the image of the 6 gems and murmured in an incredulous tone, "Infinity gems. The universe is big and mysterious. There are too many things we don't understand and too much history beyond our imagination." When Nick found me that day, I thought he was crazy, but I didn't expect that he just saw this day one step earlier. Humanity, the survival of the United States, there must be a great power to protect the world. The power of the 6 gems represents 6 ultimate weapons. Tawny suddenly looked up at Bruce. Do you remember the plan we discussed? You mean Ultron? Isn't it being designed? Sorry, man. I lied to you. The real Ultron is a toy of S.H.I.E.L.D. They found a kind of power in Loki's scepter, a magical power, the real Ultron. What I gave you is only a part of the plan. The complete plan includes more than just the robot. Including today, I have drawn considerable inspiration. Loki. Thor couldn't help looking back at his brother. Loki looked at him innocently. These 6 weapons are the pinnacle of my design. Tony Stark, the world's largest arms dealer and the best killer of all human beings. It is the perfect combination of my personal ability and the strength of the country. It is also the most terrifying, safest, and most powerful weapon of all time. Ultron is just one of them. Chapter 241. On the other side of the dimensional rift, the citizens of New York City raised their heads curiously and looked at the deep, dark vortex above their heads, the universe that was countless light years away. To normal citizens, this was nothing more than a slightly fantastical mirage, a type of astronomical wonder. But to those who knew the truth, this was a real threat, and Nick's feelings were extremely complicated. It was as if he was relieved from a heavy burden, but there was also an indescribable bitterness. The other side of the dimensional rift was not the invading army of aliens. This was a good news that made him feel relieved. However, the political direction of the human society on the other side might not be a positive thing for this country. He instinctively wanted to hide everything, just like what S.H.I.L.D. did in the past, secretly contacting the opposite side. As for the ordinary people, they should live their lives however they should. It would be best if nothing went wrong. However, this time he knew that it was impossible. An iceberg was coming head-on. It was not something that could be ignored by blindfolding one's eyes. However, these were the troubles of the future. The most important thing now was to let the ruler of this country accept this matter. A bunch of idiots. Nick spat on the ground and said fiercely, many people in this country would think that they would be ruled by a group of elites with super high IQ, drop-like temperament, serious attitude, and ability to do things. Just like what the government promoted to them, the elite politics took care of fairness and efficiency. The rulers could have the power because they were more outstanding. However, Nick would not believe these things. No one knew this group of idiots better than him. They might be a little more outstanding than the ordinary people, but it was all because the investment and education they received was more than 10 times more than the ordinary people in terms of talent, attitude, and wisdom. They were a group of ordinary people with a broader vision, more decent etiquette, and more experience. However, most of them had no chance of becoming an elite. Compared to S.H.I.E.L.D., which was a gathering of real elites, they were greedy and stupid, cowardly and disgusting. The Department of National Defense had real outstanding talents. West Point Military Academy had real outstanding talents. Wharton Business School had real outstanding talents. Ivy League produced batch after batch of elites, and S.H.I.L.D. gathered all the elites. However, Nick had to admit that the ones leading and ruling them were a group of real idiots. The ruler of this country needed those elites to help them run their business, but they did not need anyone to covet their position. So they had their own rules of the game. Confidence. They were calm, bold, and ruthless. Since they were young, they knew that their battlefield was a drunken banquet, a place of mutual deception and deceit. Therefore, they adapted to the rules of the game they set up like fish in water. One was decent, generous, and knowledgeable. The offspring who understood the rules of polite society were excellent heirs. But Nick knew confidence could be arrogance, calmness could become stupidity, boldness could sometimes be arrogance, and the other side of ruthlessness could be viciousness. In the rules of the game, they were outstanding, excellent, but this world was not really a game world for them, and not everyone liked to play under other people's rules. For example, Nick knew a certain bastard who liked to play by his own rules. Ladies, gentlemen, we are facing an unprecedented challenge in the history of mankind. It can be said that from this moment on, every moment is history. What we are about to face is an unprecedented situation. All past experiences are useless. What we need to do is truly groundbreaking, decisive, and incomparably forward-looking work. Nick suppressed his anger and tried to persuade these idiots. So, I ask you to make a decision that is truly decisive. General, that is exactly what we are doing. A committee member interrupted him impatiently and said, "What we are doing here is the decision that affects the world. Do you know how much economic loss the United States will suffer if Wall Street is not appeased? If we don't communicate with the bankers, how can we get support for our policies? Diplomacy, oil, the situation in the Middle East, counterterrorism, and stability maintenance. Our agenda is very heavy, so please don't disrupt the process of the meeting. Okay? Please proceed. I don't know if the world is decided by you, but I know that the behavior of the enemy will not be decided by you." Nick angrily interrupted him. "Open your eyes and see." Nick pointed out the window. "You think this is a threat? No, it is a revolution. It is a revolution where all the concepts and meanings that you are familiar with, everything that exists in your mind, have been turned upside down. Outside this planet, a world millions of light years away has appeared in front of us, but you're still talking about the trivial matters of this planet. Perhaps you think that it is a powerful force, but when the gears of fate began to turn, those things were already old, rotten, and lost their vitality. Finance, world trade, they were once important, but today, when the space-time door and the outerverse descended, they're no longer the mainstream of this world. How is the scientific research of the United States National Aeronautics and Space Administration?" Nick stood on the podium and asked the committee members below. "Progress is smooth. We will soon begin the 9th Mars exploration mission." Without the need for the committee members to speak, an elite from the Ivy League reported the data. "What about the industrial strength of the Houston Aerospace Industrial Base and the Oak Forest National Laboratory?" Nick continued to ask with his single eye flashing with a cold light. "This is a complex set of data. Science and industry interact with each other. Materials, processes, experimental technology, reserve generation. It is very complicated." The Ivy League graduate answered with competence. "We need time to gather the data." Nick nodded and looked at the silent committee members below the podium. He sneered and said, "No need. Just tell me how many parts of a spaceship we can produce. This, you can give me a rough idea. It could be a guess." Nick did not intend to make things difficult for him. The Ivy League graduates communicated with their alumni for a period of time before answering with more certainty. "We can take out the experimental model, but that is a prototype that cannot be replicated. It is a relic from an extraterrestrial civilization, and the true technological and industrial strength of Earth is still completely foreign to the environment of the universe." Nick interrupted him. "What could they produce?" "Oh, we don't know." The spokesperson shrugged. "We do not have the technical reserves. Spaceships from outside the galaxy do not even exist for us. In other words, we can't even produce a screw on their spaceship. Right?" "Yes." The committee members below the podium were already in an uproar. "How many spaceships can we produce with Earth's resources?" Resources exist in a broad sense. With the resources we can use now, all the industrial countries in the world can't produce a qualified spaceship even if they join forces. Even those in the solar system can't do it. The uproar below the podium was even greater. "What about the foundation of the entire world? Our productivity, industry, creativity, and labor value. How different are they compared to the extraterrestrial civilization that we are currently in contact with?" Nick pursued fiercely and asked relentlessly. This time, the Ivy League members discussed for a longer time. They began to argue until their faces were red. As time passed, they began to make phone calls, quarreling, insulting, fainting, and torturing each other until it became a pot of porridge. Then, they slowly came to a consensus and the quarrel calmed down. Finally, they gave an answer. 9 hours had already passed. An old Ivy with a head full of messy white hair and goosebumps all over his body was elected to make their final judgment. The production capacity of the entire human society, including the experimental capacity and the industrial potential within 2 months, the entire human race combined cannot compare to the production capacity of a spaceship. Even if they use hammers to create spaceships, the industrial capacity of their hammers is still greater than the sum of our industries. There was dead silence in the meeting room. Nick glanced around and looked at the ugly elites. He sneered. Now do you all understand what we are facing? He casually flipped open the notes of the key topics discussed in the previous meeting. Looking at the dazzling data, the symbols representing currencies, and the complicated financial analysis, he shook his head and sneered. Wall Street. Chi. Chapter 242. A finger swept across the space of the venue, as if a pause button had been pressed. The expressions of the committee members, who were either sarcastic or solemn, froze in the air. On the stage, Nick's mouth was slightly open, and his expression was frozen like a stone statue. On the other side, the white-haired Nick retracted his right index finger. This is indeed interesting. I remember that this is very similar to a time 27 years ago, but I'm very clear that it has never happened in my memory. All the frozen influence turned into a silver light, drilling into Nick's palm, but it looked like a piece of colorless crystal. Of course, this is not something that happened in this world, but it has indeed become history. A mysterious person wrapped in a black robe stood beside Nick. This is the history of another parallel world, and the only history. Oh, Nick, who had been acting very calm, finally raised his head. Why? Because the worlds that do not belong to this world have all been destroyed. The black-robed person's voice was a little louder. Don't you always wonder why this world would have an irreversible disaster? It is because your history is wrong, not in that person's script. You are a parallel world. You do not have this past. I think we are not the only world with a different past. Yes, but you're the last one. The black-robed person's voice was hoarse. He raised his head and looked at the sky. At this time, it was not clear whether it was day or night. The sky was as bright as day, but the sun that occupied half of the sky had disappeared without a trace. Replacing it were countless stars, big or small, dim or dazzling, densely packed, crawling over the entire sky. There are as many parallel worlds as there are possibilities, but now. He pointed at the projection crystal in Nick's hand. In the history before this, there are only two possibilities left. There are only two possibilities left. Very soon, there will only be one. That is an infinite world. So darkness and destruction are also infinite. The black-robed person's voice was dry as if there was sawdust in his throat. From that moment onwards, there is only history left. Unchangeable. Past history. From the birth of the earth, from the beginning of mankind. From the moment he descended to the moment you saw it, all that was left was the world line he had chosen. It could no longer be changed. That's why we're going to be destroyed, Nick said bitterly. Because our history isn't the one he chose. Only by erasing our existence can this world be controlled by him in a fixed orbit. Yes, killing the infinite possibilities of the universe, leaving only one fixed fate in the multiverse. But I don't understand. Why did you come here? Nick looked up at him and asked in confusion. We resist a fight against death and destruction. Then why are you resisting? For the sake of hope. The black-robed man sighed as he looked at the sky. If one were to look into the distance, the place where Nick was would rapidly shrink, and a yellow sphere that had been penetrated would appear. That was the dried-up Earth. If one were to look further, one could see countless stars distributed over millions of light years. Hundreds of trillions of stars converged into an endless sea of light, like a concentrated sea of stars. Countless stars burned nuclear fuel, gathering the light into a highly concentrated photon colloid, forcing mankind to rely on the distorted space barrier outside the Earth to divide the solar system and the Milky Way into two universes. The black zero light speed deadline. It protected mankind in the thousands of planets around the Earth. Tens of thousands of stars the size of the Earth cracked like an eggshell, and highly concentrated burning nuclear matter was quickly torn from the stars, and then spread at an unimaginable speed into the void that was measured in light years. It was like a black gap, swallowing the matter of the stars. Then an extremely brilliant pair of wings extended from the star and unfurled in the dark vacuum. Then a second, a third, and an endless number. If humans were to describe this astronomical unit that suddenly appeared, they might use angels to describe it because they were too similar, and also because these celestial bodies or lives were completely made of highly materialized light. But the real name of these things was Sephiroth. In other words, the outflow of divinity. Or an even more tongue-twisting name, a noun that was simply defined by human science. Star quantum phenomenon evaporation cloud collapse intelligent life object. In essence, it was the intelligence formed by the collapse of the highly energized and evaporated part of the stellar matter. It could also be said to be the soul of the sun. Life was born in countless stars in the universe like a plague. Their survival was exchanged for the destruction of other lives. The space defense system is overloaded by 13%. The gravity around Sephiroth is too strong. There are many stars with the weight of hundreds of thousands of suns within 90 light-years of us. Their gravity has already distorted the space. Our space barrier can't last long. Find a way to stop it. This supernova that is about to explode is about to form a black hole. How can we stop it? According to the data, there aren't many of these giant celestial bodies in the entire universe. There are only 6 of them. The headquarters has already numbered them. GC-268, Michael, K-907, Gabriel, BD-342, Raphael, AK-213, early. The powerful material force distorted the space, making the barrier that protected humans shake. Just with pure mass, the 6 Sephiroth, with the closest mass, almost collapsed the fragile barrier. But now the situation was not any better. The strong gravity had distorted the light in the surrounding tens of thousands of light-years. Like a dead line spreading, a large area of the universe suddenly turned into darkness. On Earth, it was the opposite. They found that the light in other areas of the universe had disappeared. This meant that they were already in a forming black hole. It was difficult for the light to escape this area. What's the situation? Nick frowned and asked a staff member next to him. Even though he had experienced despair several times, the staff still could not face everything calmly. He panted a few times and said nervously, "They've surrounded us. Tens of thousands of Sephiroth have appeared outside the warning line. The reason they haven't come close is because the gravity around the existence of a seraph is too terrifying. Even other stars would be torn apart if they're not careful. They are not unapproachable." The black-robed man suddenly interrupted. Nick stared at him. "What do you mean? Don't forget their essence. Sephiroth is a quantum life form, formed by the quantum plague Genophar after it infected the star's light source. Although War Skynet used the intelligent star's matter as its shell, it's just a layer of clothes. Their essence is a quantum life form, and they have no mass." "You mean they can swarm us all at once when they are naked? If I have to use an analogy, there are more stars in the universe than there are people. Humans have been relying on the mutual influence of the gravity of stars to prevent us from meeting several Sephiroth at the same time. You know, once celestial bodies of similar mass get close, the changes in their orbits will soar geometrically. The limit that humans can calculate is 3 celestial bodies. I know, it's the problem of 3 bodies. The limit that Sephiroth can do is 6. They can control 6 stars of similar mass that have a serious influence on each other. If the mass difference is relatively large, it will inevitably happen that a large mass celestial body will tear apart a small mass celestial body. This is also the advantage that humans have for survival. But this is an illusion." The black-robed man shook his head and said, "The right of human survival has never been in our hands. The one who really decides our time is him. You have always been unwilling to tell me what kind of disaster we are facing. Now that we have reached this point, can you tell me?" Nick asked calmly. "Sephiroth, or the Archangel disaster, is just a disaster in this world. In other worlds, there are 5 great gods. The Avengers have not been destroyed. The astral gods have returned from the depths of the universe, and the mutants have reappeared. They are not a hopeless disaster at all. There are many existences that can be their enemies." The black-robed man seemed to be immersed in the memories of the past. Even the 4 horsemen who created them are not invincible. Many times, we have destroyed war Skynet, polluted death, fought against famine and the Zerg to the end of the universe, and fought against the plague. Although we have lost many times, it is not as if we have not won. We've defeated the Terran insect tribe and the Blade Queen. We've destroyed a high-speed civilization that had a timeline that was 1,200 times longer than ours. We've destroyed the Tinder Origin, killed the Undead Calamity, fought a decisive battle against the Titan Giants, and perished together with the entire physical world that was controlled by Skynet. We've sacrificed hundreds of millions of lives to pollute the quantum thoughts of death. From the beginning of the Big Bang to the end of the world, we have created countless miracles and ignited sparks in the endless darkness. However, these worlds have only one ending in the end, and that is to be erased from the timeline. This is the enemy we have to face, the most dangerous disaster in this multiverse. Chapter 243. Sometimes, threats came silently. Nick, who faced the twin threats of the portal and solar storm over Manhattan on Earth, would never would have thought that Chunong was stirring waves on a much larger scale. The silence he was wary of was the omen of a greater storm. Marvel was never a one-dimensional world. It was like a colossal, twisted monster that brandished countless tentacles, with complex parallel worlds forming a complicated multiverse system. There, the timeline convergence led by Chunong was coming in full force. Skynet of war, mutants of famine. The Four Horsemen and their terrible creations were faithfully carrying out Chun-Ang's will, compressing the living space of the multiverse bit by bit, forcing everything in this world to the orbits set by Chun-Ong. To a one-dimensional being like Nick, all of this was naturally undetectable. Even if dozens of Nicks of parallel universes were blasted to smithereens at every moment, for the Nicks of other timelines, the effect was merely a lesser possibility in the future. They could not even detect such a threat. But against those terrible beings of higher dimensions, the war had already begun. In outer space, millions of kilometers away from the Black-Robed Man and Nick, the white-clothed Chun-Ong stood silently in the vacuum, maintaining the same speed as Earth. With Earth as a frame of reference, he stayed right above New York. If the entire solar system was a frame of reference, Chun-Ong was moving at an astonishing speed of several hundred meters per second, although that speed was nothing in the universe. Over 19,000 of our wars have taken place above that city. Does this planet, this city, have any special meaning to you? Across from Chun-Ong was a human-shaped miniature of the universe, as if what he was facing disdained to appear with a human's mentality. He looked like a violently shifting universe, filled with chaos, heat, and non-elemental matter that was a storm of rays. Curiosity shouldn't be an emotion you possess. Eternity. Chun-Ong called out his name, one of the 5 great creator gods of this universe. A true higher dimensional life form, an abstract god born at the moment of the Big Bang. You, the embodiment that represents the sum of time in the entire universe, will probably never have such a thing as curiosity, much less have such superfluous things like doubt. Of course, the Eternal would not be curious. It did not even have the emotions unique to life. Rather than saying that it was a life, it was better to say that it was a viral concept collection of the coordination mechanism of the universe. The most perfect one was like swallowing star, with complete emotions and self. She would become a true virus. She was almost like the goddess of death. She was like a god. She was equivalent to an incomplete life. Both eternity and infinity were far from the state of the goddess of death. It was difficult to distinguish whether it was a mechanism of the universe or an individual emotional virus. Most of the time, we fight in our true forms, but sometimes you will use your human body. We are the same existence. Why would you use the body of a carbon-based organism? Is it because you are one of them? It's the same for Star Devourer. Why do you need a body that can't accommodate you? Eternity asked doubtfully, or pretended to be doubtful. The difference is probably that I have a personality, so I still need a human body. It's the same for Star Devourer. He also has a personality, so he won't exist in the form of a concept in the universe. So he has no choice but to maintain the survival habits of his race before he became a god of creation, devouring planets to replenish his energy. There were two contradictory things that affected Chunong at the same time. Part of it was his existence as a higher dimensional existence. That kind of continuous evolution and all-encompassing instinct made him constantly have the tendency to return to absolute rationality, expanding infinitely in depth and breadth. On the other hand, the remnant part of him as a human also deeply affected him. The struggle when his personality was facing extinction allowed him to maintain many human behaviors and thinking structures, and he tried his best to solidify them. This contradiction between evolution and rigidity was a problem that even Chunong could not solve. So, I don't understand what you guys are thinking. The way of thinking of every higher dimensional existence should tend to be the same. What's the point of you in Star Devourer clinging on to the shell of a dead person, existing like a ghost? Death is also becoming more and more like you guys. What's so fascinating about those small, weak, shallow creatures that aren't even worth mentioning? Eternity asked, puzzled. No, it's not the same. Chunong shook his head. You think they're different from what I said? Eternity's virtual personality was becoming more and more vivid, actually learning to interrupt and answer first. No, Chunong denied again. I'm saying that we're different. To them, you're a higher dimensional creature, but to me, you're still a lower level existence. The difference isn't between you and them, but between me and you guys. To me, is there any difference between a lower dimensional god and a lower dimensional ant? No. Perhaps you think that there's an insurmountable gap between you and humans, so much so that you don't even bother to understand them. But to me, there's only a difference between you guys. There's no essential difference. My pursuit was actually very simple from the start. When you find yourself in a box, what you want to do is, of course, to jump out. But before that, you have to first do experiments, right? The leap from a lower dimensional creature to a higher dimension is the topic of my research. From this aspect, you can't even compare to humans. Chunong looked at him and said, without a hint of reluctance in his tone. Eternity asked why. Chunong replied, because you lack a possibility. From the Big Bang to the foreseeable future, you must be eternal and unchanging. Even the other three gods of creation are the same. They are huge, but rigid, without emotions, and will not produce variables that are beyond my control. Experiments under my control are meaningless. I need someone to bring me new opportunities, knowledge, ideas, and inspiration. This must be a miracle that is beyond my control, a miracle that leaps from a lower dimension to a higher dimension. Then it must first have unlimited possibilities, and secondly, it must be beyond my control. It is like a seed that I can't control, growing freely on suitable soil and giving me an unexpected fruit. But first, I have to filter out such a seed, something that can be called a miracle. Chapter 244. Dear human, the king of Asgard greets you. On planet Chitauri, the emissary of Asgard and the leader of the Communist Alliance met in a friendly manner. This was the other end of the portal for humans on Earth, but for Asgard, it was a clear landmark on the star map. Ever since Thor and the Avengers met with the Common Alliance, the Asgardians knew most of the things that happened on planet Chitauri. With the Bifrost, they were the only force that could contact the Common Alliance on an equal footing. Although there were many internal doubts about the abilities of humans, the Asgardians had to make contact with this very mysterious and terrible human force in the face of an increasingly urgent threat. This was already the third batch of emissaries sent by Odin. With both sides in need of contact, they had exchanged a lot of information, including the Apocalypse and the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Welcome, friends of Asgard, to the second Beijing. I hope you have brought what you promised. The diplomat was frank. His eyes swept over the metal box carried by the Asgardian emissary, and there was a faint solemnity in them. The Asgardian emissary very neatly handed him the box in his hand. The promise of my king, Odin, is more reliable than real gold. For them, Asgard has also paid a very heavy price, and the king has broken his previous oath and taken them out of the Forbidden Land. These things are very dangerous. Although they have terrible power, they hide a terrible threat that is enough to destroy us. If it wasn't to deal with the apocalypse, they wouldn't have come together. In the most heavily guarded central area of Chitauri, the diplomat carefully opened the metal box. A red solution, like floating magma, drilled out of the box and swam in the air. A hollow metal ball and a huge gem were placed side by side in the box. Mysterious and powerful forces flowed over these three items. The air was filled with tension. At present, we have a total of 4, and they are all here. The eyes of the emissary, Heimdall, seemed to be able to see through everything. The diplomat of the Republic felt as if his soul was being peeped at. It was very uncomfortable. A total of 4. Saying that, the diplomat quickly glanced at the things in the box again. After confirming that he was not mistaken, he looked up and said, "But there are only 3 here." Heimdall nodded and said, "I am the last one." He scanned his surroundings with his orange pupils and confirmed that there were no abnormalities. "We are responsible for protecting them, to prevent evil from using their power, so we have to hide them. Very few people know their true faces, and very few people know how many gems Asgard possesses. But this time, all the gems of Asgard are here. Ether particles, spirit scepter, cosmic spirit ball, soul eye. The Rubik's Cube is still in the hands of the Americans. They're still our ally, so we can't plot the one in their hands. The time gem is also on Earth, but the Supreme Sorcerer has the right to interfere. All the other gems are here. There was no one present who did not know the terrifying power of these gems. The Asgardians were one of the most knowledgeable forces in the universe about the Infinity Gem and the Common Republic, which could initially interfere with timelines and parallel worlds, probably knew even more than the Asgardians. In terms of the use of gems, the 2 forces present were definitely the best in the universe. Asgard had the Infinity Gauntlet and was a force that could really restore the true appearance of a gem, while the Common Alliance had the scientific and technological capabilities and industrial strength to research, experiment, and open the Infinity Gem. They were the only party, except for Chunong, who had the potential to see through the gem's origin. The Cosmic Cube could open wormholes at will to go where one wanted to go, move objects to any space at will, and distort or reorder space at will. The ether particles could realize any dream according to one's will. The Cosmic Spirit Ball, it could allow the user to master and control all the power and energy they wanted to master. The Spirit Scepter could allow the user to enter the thoughts of others and control their behavior. It could also allow all dreams and thoughts to enter the user's brain. The soul eye was on Heimdall. It seemed to only have the ability to peek into the soul and truth of the universe. But everyone knew that this was only a trivial ability of the soul gem. A complete soul gem could steal, manipulate, or modify souls, and was more dangerous than the soul gem. The only one that had not appeared was the time gem, which had the great power to travel through other timelines. Of course, now, it was not only the most dangerous of the 6 gems, it was also the most difficult to use. Anyone who wanted to travel through time and space had to consider the waves of destruction that were arising in the endless time and space. If they were unlucky enough to be involved in the war between the 5 gods and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, either of them wouldn't mind squashing a few ants. The mind gem is wrapped in the shell, which is a way to protect the gem and to prevent the evil psychic power inside from getting out of control. Unfortunately, when I took the gem from S.H.I.L.D., this power had already leaked out. That is why we disregarded the face of another ally and forcefully took it. Heimdall picked up the scepter and introduced it. The diplomats on the scene took the scepter and solemnly said, "Its power is dangerous, but we are not afraid of it." Odin knows, so he gave it to you, Heimdall sighed. In those parallel worlds that have disappeared, your greatness is worthy of praise. Judging from the embers passed by the world torches of the future and the past, you have always fought against him to the very end. We hope that this can help you, which is to say, to help ourselves. Heimdall picked up the hollow metal ball again. It floated quietly in his hand, but anyone who approached it could feel the terrible power in it, the terrible power that could destroy everything. Universal Spirit Orb. Heimdall read its name with a complicated expression and handed it to the hands of the Alliance personnel. Layers of halos emerged from the handsome young man, and countless adamantium robots appeared from under his wrist, carefully holding the Universal Spirit Orb. The shell of these gems is a camouflage to hide them, and it is also a tool to use their power, Heimdall solemnly said. The power of the Infinity Stone is very powerful and difficult to control. With our ability, trying to possess them is madness and dangerous. They were neither kind nor evil, but they were extremely dangerous because of their great power. That kind of pure power should not be something that we can possess, so this layer is both a seal and a protection. They're a race that once obtained the gems and used the technological weapons of the gems. Those races are very powerful, and even we admire their wisdom. In order to protect and possess them alone, they used all their wisdom. But in the end, they were still destroyed by the hands of the gems. Right? The young diplomat of the Alliance took over the conversation. Yes, Heimdall sighed as he suspended the ether particles in his palm and looked at the bright, blood-like magical substance. Just like our old enemies, the Dark Elves, they once had a civilization greater than Asgard, but the power of the gems blinded their eyes, making them greedy, cruel, and irrational. They created the shell of the reality gem, ether particles. According to our research, the nature of the reality gem is closer to the true magic of the universal substance. There are countless dark matter in the universe. They do not interfere with light, God's particles, and most of the matter known to humans. So they hide in the darkness as if they do not exist to us. They have no shape, no mass, no color, and none of the physical quantities known to humans can measure them. Heimdall nodded and said, "That's why it's called dark matter." The technology of the divine realm and earth came from the same source, so there is nothing incomprehensible about it. Yes, the diplomat said with a smile. We think that most of the universe is hidden in dark matter. It's even possible that what we can see in the entire universe is just a grain of sand in the sea of stars, even if it's dark matter. I don't find it strange that the dark universe is huge, because we are really too small outside it. But a magical substance like the reality gem is likely to have an interference reaction with most dark matter. Of course, we don't know how many kinds of dark matter can react with it, nor do we know how much of this dark world it illuminates. But from it, we can see a world that is tens of thousands of times wider than our universe. Legend has it that using this gem can truly, without exaggeration, turn these views into reality. This gem may be the most powerful. It is also the most difficult to use. Using it, people can realize any dream. All scientific codes and natural laws are meaningless in front of it, because it can modify them at will. Heimdall sighed. He suddenly shook his head again. But who knows how dangerous it is? It doesn't distort reality to realize people, and the claim that all scientific codes and natural laws can be distorted and have the power to modify reality is actually just an ignorant lie. What it actually has is the power to show reality. Under its power, the other side of the universe is exposed. In the shadow of the dark universe, you can realize any wish and see any change you want to see, because that power itself exists there. It's just that you can't see it, touch it, interfere with it, and can't use it before. You think you've distorted reality, but it's actually just recreating it. The young diplomat suddenly laughed. Yes, Heimdall also laughed. Reality is there, you just discovered it. So it's really worthy of being called the reality gem. The Dark Elves found a way to use it. They created a shell that could control the reality gem to discover a kind of dark matter that could absorb light particles and was extremely compatible with the Dark Elf constitution, ether. They even used ether to change their constitution. In order to dominate the universe, they tried to use the power of ether to plunge the universe into eternal darkness. What a crazy and powerful power. The diplomat of the Common Alliance sighed as he looked at the ether particles in his palm. Heimdall also sighed. That's why Asgard is wary of them. But today we have no choice No crazy power is as crazy as him, and no terrible consequences will be more terrible than him. The young warrior of the Common Alliance looked up and said, "We have no choice but to fight for hope. I hope that the world can wait for the arrival of dawn," Heimdall said solemnly. "We are willing to pay any price." He stretched out his hand and gouged out his eye. "What are you doing?" The people of the Common Alliance wanted to stop him, but they were stopped by the other emissaries of Asgard. Heimdall's eye sockets were sunken, and 2 lines of bloody tears flowed down, but he raised his hand to stop him. He opened his palm, and an orange soul gem wrapped in his eye, shining brightly. "This is the 4th gem. Take it. My friend, please bring dawn to the world. The darkness is too long. We can't bear it anymore." Someone said to him, "The morning will come." To be continued. Chapter 245. For the selfish vanity, for the lowly sense of security, and for the hypocritical prosperity, the differences between people were magnified. Society also made a series of deceptions, lies, and false promises to slow down the pace of human progress. Yuri stood at the bow of the rugged Soviet-style floating airship. Looking down from the porthole, the towering skyscrapers that were thousands of meters above the ground were just big boxes, and the people were like ants. People who hadn't been modified would never be able to see them clearly. This is an old trick of the evil privileged class, great leader. From the despicable feudal lords to the rotten capitalists, all their efforts are to maintain order that is beneficial to them. Facts have proven that as long as this order is disturbed, they will act as quickly as a lady whose skirt has been lifted. That's why people are weak, Walesa, Yuri said decisively. If they could be deceived by a lie for 1,000 years, they could be deceived by other lies for 10,000 years. They are not worth looking forward to, but our allies don't believe this. Monarchy, rule, divine authority, religion, and bloodline, one obvious lie after another. Until now, people still believe in it. Because human nature is greedy, stupid, lazy, and lazy, they don't have the ability to distinguish the truth. Because people are weak, they don't have the ability to persist in the truth. All of this can only be done with the determination of steel. But the people don't have such a will. Let's start from the old society, Walesa. The leader waved his hand and said with a firm tone, "Look at the people's lives. They are worse than dogs. They're just tools for the nobles. But until they can't live, they don't even know how to fight back. They let the scum rule for dozens of centuries. But what drives the progress of society? It's the greed of the second-class lords. And the people are still worse than pigs and dogs. They're trapped in lies and whips. They pull each other and don't dare to take a step forward." The great leader Marx exposed the lies of the nobles. But what was the result? An even better lie, telling them that submission is the happiest and most reasonable life. Work is not for self-realization, but for survival. Human transactions are not based on demand, but on the market. Oh my God, what a big lie they had told. But the funniest thing is that the people believed it, so they betrayed the Soviets. Walesa had to remind Yuri on the basis of the consensus of the League. Leader, with all due respect, it was the Soviets who betrayed them. The officials. Then capture them and chop off their heads. Yuri gestured angrily. He put his hands behind his back and suppressed his anger. They are too weak. They are not of the Soviets. They have no fighting spirit at all. Indulging in a lie of happiness, the people need an iron will, a unified will. A voice. Yuri spread out his hands. "That's my voice." Yuri spread out his hands. The Republic believes that human nature can be changed. As long as there is enough investment, a person can be perfected. Yuri sighed. "But I don't believe it. The Soviets are like Naf. You're like a nanny taking care of the people, but you can't give them a firm will. You can't defeat Tianchi with such methods. Of war. Suf of. Yuri put on the telepathic helmet. "We need someone as determined as Stalin. Lenin's wisdom, absolute justice, and an indomitable will to lead us. My will is far from enough. The weakness of human, I do not lack any. The stupidity of human, I do not lack any. I want to be stronger. It is time to make a sacrifice." He silently turned on his helmet, and the psionic beacon tower on the airship. He looked back at his loyal guard for the last time and sighed. I am still too weak. I can feel tears in the corner of my eyes. It is vodka. If I lose control, let our ally destroy me. Yuri opened his arms and activated the psionic beacon tower. In an instant, Yuri's spirit was connected with the Soviets. The absolute and glorious personality created by the Republic and the Soviets poured into Yuri's body, making his withered body swell into a mass of muscles. All the correct personality of human, in line with the standard of a warrior, a Soviet warrior, was connected to the entire Soviet Union. Yuri's eyes were wide open, and the huge amount of information destroyed his personality in 1/10,000th of a second. At the last moment, Yuri let out a deafening roar. For everything of the Soviets. Walesa, I don't want to be a human anymore. At this moment, the Republic soldiers on the other side of the portal suddenly raised the guns in their hands, raising these ancient weapons above their heads. The 22 cannons that symbolized the fighting spirit of mankind were fired, honoring the birth of the most mentally powerful warrior in the history of mankind. No forgiveness, no hypocrisy, no weakness. Our goal is to move forward towards the truth. Forward. Forward. Great Soviet warrior. Destroy everything in the old world and create everything in the new era. Fight. Comrades, smash everything in sight into ruins, abandon all hypocrisy and weakness, and stand up. Comrades. In the bleak autumn wind, New Yorkers quickly walked through the bleak streets, wrapping themselves tightly in their clothes. On the newspapers that were blown all over the sky by the wind, the words were hard to read. Only the ink-black title could be vaguely seen. The world economy lasts 39 days of depression. Solar crisis. How many days until the apocalypse? How long can humans last in outer space? The Federal Reserve is powerless to control the depreciation of the dollar. The fluttering newspapers clattered on the streets and fell onto the public facilities, adding a sense of loneliness to the atmosphere. A few pedestrians quickened their steps and left the ghostly street. In the darkness, only the shadows of a few stray cats flashed by, creating a lively noise. Ever since Skynet took control, the population of New York had been decreasing day by day. Now, the U.S. military and war robots were miraculously more than the citizens. Coupled with the spies from various countries, members of mysterious organizations, superheroes, and supercriminals, the situation was getting out of control. A small number of citizens had also moved to the Bronx, where the government forces and superheroes were stationed. This was the forward zone of the alien invasion, the base of the Demon King who destroyed the world, and the heaven of ambitious people and underground organizations. The portal above their heads constantly reminded the people of the impending danger. New Yorkers seemed to have gotten used to it. That afternoon, most of the citizens heard a strange sound. It sounded like a huge building and the whistling of the wind. It was unusually mournful, and the wind in New York grew stronger. A huge shadow squeezed out from the hole above. The vast shadow slowly spread and covered the sky. A huge, non-reflective metal mountain pressed down from the sky. It was as if there was a steel wall pressing down on them. Holy Mother Mary! New Yorkers, who thought their nerves had been tempered to be abnormally strong, stared at everything in shock. They were not only shocked by the huge steel battleship, but also the familiar flags and symbols that every American had come into contact with. The fiery red color, the solidified blood-red color, made people tremble. Indistinctly, a chorus that resounded through the heavens rang in his ears. Chapter 246. In the Common Alliance's mental network, countless consciousnesses were exchanging information and thoughts. Now, the rapidly evolving humans of the Common Alliance were gradually creating new cultures and habits. Thanks. Language was being replaced by thoughts and telepathy due to the inefficiency of understanding and transmission. The mental network was a product of the rapid evolution of information, knowledge, and perfection. It satisfied the need for communication after the evolution of human biology and the gradual disconnection of society. The original language, writing, music, and all other cultures were facing the danger of being eliminated because they were too simple and primitive. The brain, whose thinking speed had increased exponentially, felt that everything in the old world was too simple. Music was too simple. The fluctuation of sound in the range of 20 to 20,000 hertz was full of loopholes and random. The once beautiful melodies, beautiful poems, and magnificent art were being eliminated at an amazing speed in this day and age where everything was changing rapidly. The wonderful miracle the humans once created by limiting their hearing frequency to within the range of 20 to 20,000 hertz seemed so simple and unadorned in the ears of the new humans who could hear electromagnetic waves, gravitational waves, and listen to the background music of the universe and appreciate the sounds produced by the stars. Everything was under the influence of the Republic's symphony orchestra. Using the gravitational flow, electromagnetic waves, and thermal radiation of the 2 galaxies, 6 stars, and 19 planets near Chitauri, they played a starry music that reverberated throughout the entire Chitauri galaxy. After shocking the whole world, it quietly changed. More and more members of the Common Alliance began to inherit the foundation of history and create a new era of culture. Under the suppression of the wartime system, the disconnection between mankind's increasing material productivity and the original backward culture and spiritual wealth quietly sprouted. The mental network that accommodated the entire Common Alliance of 3 billion people was operating in an orderly and harmonious manner. The leaders of the Republic, the Soviet Union, and the European community all gave up a part of their autonomy in thinking and presided over the exchange of thoughts in the mental network so that the wisdom of mankind could be organically combined. 3 billion different consciousnesses broke through the mental barrier to a certain extent. With a brand new structure, a more perfect collective consciousness was formed. The Republic's will of China, the Soviet Union's iron will, and the European community's ocean of dreams. This was the highest democratic mechanism of the Common Alliance. Every citizen contributed their own wisdom to achieve a frank exchange of hearts. Under the premise that values, worldviews, and outlook on life gradually converged, the direction of the organization was decided together. Before the exchange, we must confirm a premise. Will of China's spokesperson spoke on behalf of the entire Republic of China. They all admit that humans from Earth in the parallel world are members of the human race, right? Yes. Although the human genes in this world carry the shadow of artificial creatures, most people agree to regard the human beings of Marvel World, whose history, culture, and even 3 views are similar to those of the former human beings, as members of the human race. Then, regarding the relationship between the Common Alliance and the humans of this world, the most important question is, do the people have the right to be stupid? Do the people have the freedom to fall? Only when this problem is solved can we decide whether to forcefully interfere with the sovereignty of the countries and peoples of this world. The 3 parties reached a consensus in an instant. No, they have no right to be stupid. Realizing oneself, liberating one's mind, reforming oneself through learning and labor, perfecting one's personality, and promoting the development of the entire society with one's personal progress were the duties and responsibilities of every human being, as well as the natural responsibility of the human race. We have an unshirkable responsibility for the continuation of the race, the progress of society, and the fulfillment of the basic needs of the individual. The will of the Republic emphasized, have the will to progress and the need to develop. This is the basic requirement of society for people. Yuri, who unified the consciousness of the entire Soviet Union, had the simplest attitude. Self-degeneration, stupid scum, there is no need for them to exist in this world. There is no need for them to be defined as humans. Children do not have the right to not learn. The humans of this world are still very young, and they do not have the right to make stupid choices. We have an obligation to them, to the entire world. The Common Alliance has the obligation to achieve the liberation of mankind and the development of society. Individuals have the responsibility to help others further achieve self-growth. Whether it is the Common Alliance or myself, we all have the responsibility to liberate this world. This is the duty of the Communist Party. Then, all members of the Common Alliance have unanimously decided to liberate Europe, liberate East Asia, liberate Central Asia, and finally liberate Earth, forcefully promote the development of this world, and realize the self-liberation and perfection of human needs. This is the reason for you to invade our country? Nick looked at the righteous man in front of him in surprise, as if trying to see through his veteran politician's skin. But no matter how he looked, he only saw the sincerity and confidence on Yang Chi's face. He finally believed that this man was really what he thought. Not only did it not make him feel ridiculous, but also made him feel even more terrified. Liberating all mankind is our responsibility. This is what we should do, Yang Chi repeated. Nick only wanted to curse out loud. But F***CK, we never invited you to do this. This country, this people have never allowed you to do this. You are strengthening our willpower. This is a shameless invasion. You will not receive justice and help from this country. On the contrary, everyone you want to liberate will stand up against you. They will fight to the last drop of blood. For you? Yang Chi asked in confusion. Who would reject progress and liberation? Who would reject a beautiful future? That is not a beautiful thing. In this country, they have everything: equal opportunity, free will, democratic system. We are heading in the right direction, not succumbing to the rule of the Chinese, the Russians, and the damned Europeans. We will not welcome your invasion. Nick roared like a lion. Yang Chi only said calmly, "That is only what you think." "Why do you say that?" Captain America stood in front of him and asked seriously, "Do you think this country will succumb? You think too much, Nazi. In fact, the country you think of is not equal, not free, not democratic." Yang Chi smiled very gently. "You may think it is unbelievable. After lying for a long time, even you yourself will believe it, but a lie is a lie. You mistreat the people, depriving everyone of their right to development. Everyone is born equal and free. They have the right to pursue a perfect personality, self-realization, learning, and development. You have deprived them of their right to development. Under the lie of freedom, you have created a scam of equality. But what is your equality? It is the equality of animals. You have never included all the key factors that determine human nature into the equality that they should have. You allow the people to be lazy, stupid, and degenerate. You encourage the people to degenerate. Facts have proven that in your country, the ruling class has a better right to development. It is not only in terms of skills, but also in terms of personality. They generally have better quality, psychological quality, and even physical quality. They have a more perfect personality and better character. The thing that determines a person's fundamental quality is drawn by money. The ruling class has all the conditions to cultivate these qualities, but the people are encouraged to be stupid. Your so-called equality has only one direction. That is, the ruler has the qualities of a ruler, and the people are encouraged to have the requirements of being ruled. This is a lie of money. It seems that the nobility of personality has nothing to do with capital, but in reality, it is the same as in the Middle Ages. Nobility becomes the character of the ruler. It is not that the people are despicable, but they do not have the conditions to be noble. When you deprive them of the right to development, the so-called equality of opportunity becomes a lie. You oppress the people, and freedom becomes the slave of money. The freedom to have $10 million is different from the freedom to have nothing. But you lie to the people, saying that people with $10 million are as free as them. But the real key is that in your society, freedom is conditional, and wealth becomes the only standard of freedom. The root of freedom is not in your lies, but in productivity. Your system, law, and even everything is to protect the freedom of the rulers. They are free to exploit and oppress, free to rule and occupy, but the people are bound by the division of wealth and the distribution of material products by money. This is a big lie, and democracy is your plaything. This hypocritical fig leaf cannot withstand a single blow, Yang Chi said seriously. Lies are ultimately lies. If we did not appear, you could continue to claim that your system is the best in the world, but now we are here. Lies cannot withstand a single blow in front of the truth. If your so-called truth is limited to this, Nick sneered, this is no different from what those lunatics said. In fact, the people who criticize our government can form a line from California to Ontario. Who cares about them? Yang Qi shook his head and said, I think you may have misunderstood the difference between truth and propaganda. The key is that we really exist. The people may not see through lies, but they can still see the truth. We will let them see it. Your lies are based on pervasive propaganda and persistent deception. To be honest, if more than 80% of the world's sociologists help you to promote this lie, of course, it is indestructible. But you will know that language and words are not the most moving thing in this world. The direct exchange of ideas is. In terms of the ability to transmit information and ideas, there's a world of difference between us. According to our research, the advantage of the suppression of information can modify and distort people's consciousness and even reduce the other's existence dimension. The future war will be an information war. 30 minutes later, Yuri opened the Mind Beacon Tower above New York. His personality collapsed under the impact of the information flow and was reshaped into iron will. Chapter 247. Red Square, the Kremlin. The Russian president was holding a phone call from the White House. He was going crazy with suspicion. Sir, can we confirm your identity first? I know this is a top-secret line, but I really don't want to talk about the Soviet Union's invasion of you anymore. You said there are at least 800 aircraft carriers over the United States, but I haven't received any reports. No. Oh my God. Can we not talk about the Soviet Union? That giant has already fallen. Finally, he heard a strange tone from the other end of the phone. Believe me, not receiving any reports means something in itself. You can turn on the news and take a look. Shaking his head, he put down the phone in his hand and gave a few instructions to the guard next to him. This is Washington, CNN reporting for you. From California to Alaska, from San Francisco to New York, an old ghost has been resurrected. It's hovering over the entire American continent. The reporter on the screen said incoherently, I don't know if I'm the only one hallucinating or if the whole world has gone crazy. But I saw the F*King Soviet flag. The truth is that we've been deceived. On a talk show, a civilian scientist jumped on the host chair and shouted, there has never been a country called Russia. After the Star Wars project, our president lied to all of us in order to avoid the growing movement's impact on the United States. The moon landing was a rehearsal, then the internet, TV. They were experimenting with whether they could create a huge illusion through the media and lies. The illusion of the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. They controlled us through the media, along with Europe. Other countries outside the United States are just a model set up in Africa. Everyone who went abroad went to Africa. As for those big cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Moscow, they were all sealed off parts of New York. It was a huge artificial Chinatown. In this way, we can simulate other countries, world politics, and history. The truth is that the Soviet Union never failed. They became stronger and stronger. They liberated Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, Antarctica, North America, East Asia. South America, the evil red flag has been planted in every corner of the world. Now, they're going to occupy the United States. Mr. Luo Ji, that's impossible, okay? The host tried to stop him. I can tell you for sure, Mr. Luo Ji, I've been to Russia and China. This world is real. Really? Luo Ji sneered. Then how many places have you been? How much do you know about the place? Are you sure that there is this country, its system, its territory? Is the culture, the people what you know? If Russia exists, then is it the Soviet army from the stars above us? In the satellite image, the fleet occupying the sky above North America occupied more than half of the screen, and the curvature of the Earth was clearly visible. It seemed that North America had been completely enveloped by these terrifying creations. Zooming in on the image, one could still see the U.S. Air Force fighter jets looking for opportunities, but there were also more wreckage and burning fireballs. Through the internet, More intelligence from the White House appeared in his hands. In a combat video of the Air Force's probing attack on the floating battleships, most of the fighter jets were destroyed by the agile, palm-sized, unmanned aerial vehicles in the sky before they could even get close to the attack range. These little things rushed into the engine of the plane at a speed of more than Mach 10 and tore the entire plane apart. Most of the time, there wasn't even a single enemy. There were only Soviet emblems and flags fluttering in the most conspicuous places on the weapons. In a tragic attack by the Fifth Fleet, the aircraft carriers forcefully took off, and the warships fired at the enemy tens of thousands of meters in the sky. Missiles and nuclear weapons crashed into the translucent energy shield and burned into huge fireballs. Steel explosions, burning, and loud noises distorted the air in front of the Iron Curtain. The huge Iron Curtain that covered the entire sky remained unscathed. In the end, following the roar of a huge cannon on the Iron Curtain, a black dot appeared in the middle of the Fifth Fleet. The video seemed to have stopped at this moment, and one could see that this was slowed down to the extreme. The black dot quickly turned into a black shadow and shrouded a huge area. First, there was an incomparably violent impact. In the video, frigates that weighed tens of thousands of tons were thrown high up in the sea. They were at least 20 meters away from the sea level. There was even a frigate close to the aircraft carrier that flipped over. However, this was only the prelude. A huge suction force erupted from the black dot, and the steel let out a loud sound as if it couldn't bear the weight. In just a few seconds, the machinery, the huge ship, and the aircraft carrier were twisted into a huge solid iron ball by the powerful suction force and sank into the deep sea. This is the live data of what just happened. The entire United States has lost most of its attack capabilities in outer space 2 hours ago. Just now, the Seventh Fleet was attacked by the People's Liberation Army in the South China Sea. We have lost almost all of our navy. Now, China and Europe have changed drastically. We have lost contact with 1/3 of the entire territory of the civilized world. The superhero team to rescue you is on the way, sir. I hope you can cooperate. Now there is no doubt that you have lost control of this country. Our common enemy is Yuri, a psychic who is proficient in psychic abilities. Mind control? His tone was sharp. How can you prove what you said? How can you ensure the safety of mind control? Russia has an emergency refuge base. We can guarantee the existence of the government in any case. The Russian government in the United States will only be a government that betrays Russia. Sir, the enemy this time doesn't need mind control to overthrow your country. The giant Soviet has fallen, but its soul is still lingering in this country. Every person in this country is a potential revolutionary. They only need a little spark to set off a huge tsunami. Your people are far less determined than us. The United States has received help from a friendly alien existence, Celestial. Their professor-like consul is a psychic who is more powerful than Yuri. He is willing to protect the free will of humans from being violated. In Washington, we have built a huge brainwave controller that is enough to fight against Yuri's mind beacon tower. Hello, sir? Hello. Are you okay? The person on the other end of the phone was a little annoyed. He anxiously waited in the temporary office. Is there a problem with the line? The line signal with Russia is good. How far is the rescue team from the Kremlin? 18 minutes to reach the scene. On the red square, Yuri stood in the middle of the cheering crowd. The sun shone in his calm eyes, making a dazzling halo appear on the back of his head. People affectionately looked at his iconic bald head. Although it was the first time for them to see their leader, the telepathic communication made him like an old friend to them. Can we really save the Soviet? A young man looked excited and sorrowful as he begged Yuri for an answer. The upper class of this country has been corrupted. They will not give up their power. Can we really achieve it? Of course, Yuri answered with absolute certainty. All the sufferings this country has experienced in the past have been deeply engraved in our bones. The things that we've failed, the things that we've forgotten, the pain and glory, the weakness and determination, they've all been deeply engraved in our bones. Once, I was just like all of you, lost, unable to find the direction of the red flag, until I regain my faith. They called me the demon Yuri and scolded me for using evil mind control. They erased your free will and thought that I played with the skeleton of the dead giant, enslaved the people, and controlled your body and soul. But you know the truth, Yuri roared. Every one of us knows the truth. The truth is that we have been brainwashed and deceived. The truth is that freedom is the enemy's freedom to brainwash us. The truth is that every one of us is stupid and weak. As always, we try not to see the truth of this cruel world. The truth is that we don't have a strong will to make up our minds, to act and create a different self. The truth is that we can't even free ourselves. It's due to the greed and laziness of human nature. This is the truth of the matter. The light is in front of us, but the truth that we are blind to. It can never be achieved because it violates human nature. It is not free, not democratic. It will enslave us and make us unable to live a life of depravity and indulgence. It can't be achieved because not everyone can be a saint, because we have low self-esteem, we are weak, we are lazy, we are greedy, we are stupid. Yuri raised his right hand high. Everyone is not perfect, but we have the determination to be perfect. We eradicate the weakness, overcome the laziness, forget the greed, abandon the stupidity, learn to sacrifice and love, become great, to fight for the progress and liberation of human beings, to create a glorious and everlasting era with our own hands. The most precious thing to a person is life. Life belongs to a person only once. A person's life should be spent in this way. When he looks back on the past, he won't regret his mediocrity and wasted years, nor will he feel guilty for being a despicable person and living a vulgar life. In this way, when he is dying, he can say, I have devoted all my life and all my energy to the most magnificent cause in the world, the struggle for the liberation of human beings. Now, comrades, if you are willing to accept the will of the great leader Lenin and Stalin, to give up everything for the progress and liberation of human beings, to transform yourself, to become a noble, determined, and pure person, to create the future of human beings, if you are willing to be brainwashed like this, please raise your right hand. The sea of people on the Red Square, and even the whole of Russia, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, Cuba, and South America, except for North America, which was protected by another powerful spiritual force. The whole world could feel and touch Yuri's thoughts and will. Anyone who is willing to come in contact with this could communicate deeply with Yuri. They could feel Yuri's memories and thoughts, as if he had let go of the protection of his own thoughts and exposed them to everyone's eyes. He was frank and determined to show his path to everyone. Soon, someone raised his right hand, followed by the second and the third. Like a huge wave, from the Red Square to the Kremlin, from Moscow to Vladivostok, many people raised their right hands. They gave up their own free will and used brainwashing to eliminate the self that they thought was not perfect. Everyone is a saint. If this is brainwashing, then so be it. The justice in my heart doesn't need their approval, and it doesn't need the affirmation of those liars, robbers, and politicians. It's not me who controls them, but the unwilling mediocrity in their hearts. Everyone has a great personality in their heart, to be their own master. Yuri thought, let our minds and hearts connect with everything, and let our wills be as strong as steel. Let us know the truth of this world, learn the truth of science, perfect ourselves and personality, strive to create and liberate the world. Forward, Davalishi! Hurrah! A tsunami of cheers started from the Red Square and spread to Moscow, Russia, Asia, the whole world. In the genetic engineering base, the eyes of countless clones opened at this moment. The consciousness and soul summoned by Yuri from the upper reaches of the river of time were injected into these clones with memories. The petri dish opened, and countless Soviet Red Army soldiers walked out from history. They touched this era excitedly, stepped onto tanks and battleships, equipped with mechas and exoskeletons, picked up Gaussian weapons and electromagnetic cannons, drove Apocalypse tanks and Kirov airships, and used the knowledge in their memories to control these unfamiliar weapons, rumbling toward the battlefield of the past. After a long time, a voice could be heard. In the name of the great leader Yuri, I will bring you, the corrupt lackey of capitalism, the traitor of the American people, the final judgment. Chapter 248. China has fallen. Japan has fallen. Central Asia has fallen. Eastern Europe has fallen. Northern Europe has fallen. Hell, even Western Europe and the UK have changed their flags. General Cavino's expression was extremely ugly as he looked at the red area from Asia to Europe on the map. We're almost facing the whole world. East Asia is a monster house. North Korea, South Korea, Japan, China, any one of them can drag us into a long, bloody war. Europe is the second center of the world, and its overall strength is not inferior to ours. There's also the Soviet Union, the ghost that crawled out of the tomb of time. The polar bear has a cruel temperament. They seem to be born to live in war, and they can endure the pain of war more than we can. Each of these forces has the potential to shake the rule of the U.S. General Cavino looked at the red sickle and hammer flags on the world map and felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. The People's Republic of China, the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic, the Pan-European Communist Alliance, and their allied organization, the Human Liberation and Communist Revolution Alliance. It makes us feel fear that we haven't felt for a long time. This article was written by Starter. Compared to other crises and enemies, they may not be the most powerful and certainly not the most dangerous. Why do we fear them the most? Nick asked, puzzled. You're still too young. General Cavino said, not young in age, but young in political age. Time has made you forget the fear of being subverted by the communists and the humiliation our country suffered during the period when the polar bear was at its most fanatical. The Communist Revolutionary Alliance made me return to that cold, hard era. Yuri made me feel very uncomfortable. He has the shadow of that era. His psychic ability is also very scary, very much like that era. There was a period when the international communist movement was at its most violent. Truman sleeps with a gun under his pillow. Ism is a terrible thing. It can make sons rebel against their fathers. People kill their brothers. Couples turn against each other. Friends leave each other. Workers shoot their bosses. Soldiers take up guns and betray their motherland. For it, some people can endure all kinds of torture, abandon all love, and carry the cross. They stumble through thorns. Every hero has this kind of power that supports them. Nick said non-committally, that is justice. General Cavino looked up and interrupted him. The doctrine is there justice. Although the situation is serious, other than the Soviet Union, the other two members of the People's Revolutionary Alliance do not intend to have a direct conflict with us. China is busy solving the solar crisis, and Europe has to worry about the liberation of the world. Africa, Australia, Southeast Asia, South America. In the Middle East, only the polar bears are eyeing us. Nick highlighted the Soviet Union's territory on the map. Currently, Skynet and the Soviet Union's floating battleships are in a stalemate. They can really affect us. With only mind control, this battle will definitely be fought in the human's consciousness network. The general's gaze sharpened. Professor, do you agree to support us fully? No. Nick shook his head regretfully. He still holds the idea of defense and counterattack. He insists on the position of freedom of thought and will never agree to help us control the minds of the Soviets. However, he will do his best to protect the right of the American people to think freely. Yuri's mental invasion was trapped by him in the territory of the Revolutionary Alliance, but he was unable to fight back. Any extreme action would cause China and the European community to join the war. He is an alien. We can't trust him. Can we train our own psionic ability users? Use the brainwave enhancer to fight against the Soviet Union's mind controller? Yuri is too powerful. He can modify the consciousness of a country as easily as waving his hand. The fragile mental defense of human beings led our efforts and weapons in front of him. It is as fragile as a piece of paper. Please don't forget the scene at the front line. Those dead soldiers seem to be resurrected from old photos. The fanatical army appeared from the other side of time and space. I believe that scene must have become a nightmare for many big shots. General, it's not that we don't know the danger, but we have no other choice. Nick's tone was not relaxed. The Avengers trust him. I'm also willing to believe that he has good intentions towards us. At least he has the same enemy as us. We need a chance to win, the general said in an indiscernible tone. We can't hand over the lifeline of our country to an alien that we don't understand at all for a long time. The situation does not allow us to take risks. Then let the Avengers go. You convinced us that the Avengers are the key to Earth's defense, an important defense system to maintain global security. Now it is your turn to prove them. You want the Avengers to help us fight for the key to victory. Nick looked in the direction of the Avengers building. It is also the key for the Avengers to prove themselves. The general's expression was cold. With a hint of dissatisfaction, he said, "We have given a lot of resources to support you, Nick. You have to let us see the returns. Whether it is fighting against the apocalypse, solving the solar crisis, or the alien invasion, the Avengers have not played a key role. The most disappointing thing is Natalie's betrayal. We used to trust you, but now you make us doubt. An unrestrained playboy, an old popsicle that has just been defrosted, a crazy monster, and an old man with a bow and arrow. Oh, and the former Soviet agent who has betrayed us. How can you bear the heavy responsibility of saving the world? We still have Thor," Nick said stubbornly. "Don't leave one out. Oh, and an alien." The general's expression was full of sarcasm. "Now, I need them to play their role and create a chance for us to win." The general pointed to a spot on the map and said, "Here, right here is our biggest enemy, Yuri's mind controller. Destroy it, and the professor can gain an overall advantage and save the Soviets from the hands of that tyrant. But that place is one of the Soviet Union's key defense areas. That is Stalingrad. The Red Army has 30 mecha operators and 2 floating fleets stationed nearby. Every one of them is a clone predator. They have killed countless people and have experienced hundreds of battles. They are equipped with kinetic skeletons, kinetic energy, and electromagnetic weapons. There are obvious signs of modification. So we need heroes," the general said calmly. "But that is suicide. We have to cross the long territory controlled by the Revolutionary Alliance. Even if we can hide from the Soviet Union and the European community, we definitely can't hide from China. Without the cover of the terrain, fighting with China, who has mastered space, energy, and information weapons, is simply suicide. They definitely don't mind vaporizing the Avengers along with 10 kilometers of land." The general stretched out his index finger and calmly tapped it in front of Nick. "Of course it will not be that simple. The technology of the Revolutionary Alliance is terrifying, but our technology is not completely stagnant. At least we have simulated the technical principle of the Rainbow Bridge, the pride of the Asgardians, and realized Einstein's great idea. What you will see is the top secret of the United States, the pride of modern technology from human fantasy to reality, the hyperspace transporter. You can also call it the Einstein-Rosen Bridge." Washington, Einstein-Rosen Bridge was a huge building. It was long and thin, like a giant cannon lying on the ground. The skeleton of the building was made of pure metal. Tony could recognize the huge arc reactor at the bottom of the building at a glance. "Stark, what do you think it does?" Bruce asked him worriedly. Tony's expression was not good. This was not only because of the military's almost undisguised hostility towards them, but more because of what they found on the Rosen Bridge. Such a large arc reactor is enough to power a city. It seems that this is not as simple as a teleportation bridge. It may also be a weapon. Because of the fall of New York, most of the important scientific research institutions and military facilities were moved to Washington. The professor's brainwave intensifier was near Capitol Hill, maintained by the mutants. Bruce completely recognized the professor as his student and once entered it to learn how to control his own mind. In the distant Stalingrad, Natasha was wiping her sniper rifle. She put on her military uniform. She did not look like the capable female spy of the past at all. Instead, she looked like a female warrior. She lived passionately and happily, as relaxed as if she had returned home. She received new equipment, underwent human transformation, and became a member of the Red Army stationed in Stalingrad. The psionic beacon tower shone brightly under the sunlight. Yuri's evil bald head reflected a cold light. His gaze looked into the void in the distance, and met with a similar bald head in the distant United States. I am Yuri, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Chief Political Commissar of the Red Army. All troops, listen to my orders. The first phase of the battle begins. The incandescent light of the psionic beacon tower shone on Yuri's bald head. His pupils became almost pure white, and his eyes, without the black of his eyes, looked extremely evil. However, his voice seemed to have a special magic that could make every Red Army commander focus on the instructions in the headset. Dawasili attack. Victory belongs to all mankind. Glory belongs to the Soviet. Victory. Long live. Long live. The floating battleships that covered the sky converged into a sea of steel and red flags. The huge hull shattered the clouds in the sky. The huge battleship that was the size of a small mountain crushed everything with an indomitable momentum and moved almost in a straight line toward the Atlantic Ocean. The Terafov reactor provided a surging energy core. Blue energy waves flowed out of the hull and tore the surrounding air apart. The Red Army soldiers on the fleet, wrapped in exoskeletons, shouted with tears in their eyes along with the voice coming from the headset. Long live, Soviet! Long live, Comrade Yuri! The repulsive shield system installed on the chassis of the floating battleship, in the absence of the anti-gravity system, almost lifted the huge body of the battleship that weighed millions of tons. The floating battleship that was more than 800 meters in length was only a little more than 200 meters above the ground. The huge anti-gravity system almost destroyed everything in its way, be it troops, weapons, obstacles, hills, or forests. Also on the east coast of the United States, 12 floating carriers and the remaining aircraft carrier battle groups departed from the port. On the dozens of well-functioning airfields that were urgently opened nearby, tens of thousands of fighter jets were on standby. The war was about to break out. To be continued. Chapter 249. The soldiers of the U.S. Navy swallowed silently and looked nervously at the inconspicuous waterline where the Atlantic Ocean and the sky met. The Soviets were advancing. General Carvino's heart almost sank to the bottom of the sea. The crude American order was instantly stuffed back into his stomach by the terrible disaster in front of him. Unlike the young people after the Cold War, the old general still remembered the huge, cold, and cruel old opponent of the past. But he had never been afraid because he knew that even though the Soviet Union was crazy and powerful, its rigid system and bureaucratic army could never be called a great enemy of the U.S. Everything was different now. When this army, party, and country that had been buried by history was resurrected and reappeared in this world, it was already different from the polar bear in his memory. The huge floating battleship was like a protruding city at the end of the water sky. Facing east, the general saw nothing but the sun and these war machines that were as big as the sun. The steel monsters weighing tens of millions of tons made the fighter pilots who tried to approach the floating battleship dizzy. The floating battleship was very fast. The guided missile destroyer John Paul Jones, which General Carvino rode on, had a speed of nearly 40 knots. It had a glorious history of destroying alien battleships in the Pacific Ocean. This time, the U.S. used it as their flagship not only because of the survivability of the guided missile destroyer, but also to boost the morale of the Navy. The Heaven Shield floating above the Jones was only traveling at 28 knots. The entire fleet was almost made up of the U.S. Navy. Not only were there the urgent completion of the 3 aircraft carriers 3210, 3211, and 3213, but there were also old antiques like the modified and repaired USS Missouri. There were more than 2 million soldiers in the Navy alone. It could be said that this was where all the naval forces of the free world were located. General Nakamura, the current position of the Alliance fleet, General Carvino ordered over the radio. From Mikado, although the English with the Japanese accent was a little strange, the general could still hear it clearly. The Alliance fleet will arrive at the predetermined battlefield in half an hour. General Nakamura, General Park Chihudo, General Kate. We're the last hope of the free world. Japan and Korea are already under China's control. If the Alliance fleet fails in the battle against the Soviet Union, the government in exile will lose their last chance. Humanity's freedom and right to survival will inevitably be trampled and destroyed. General Carvino paused for a moment before slowly saying, "The First Fleet has arrived at the predetermined battlefield. The crossfire will begin in 3 minutes. Everyone, if I am unfortunate enough to die in battle, please take the flag of freedom from my hands and fight to the end with the enemy." General Cavino cut off the radio in his hand and roared at the command room. "Fire control now. Report the weapons. I've locked onto the target. The turrets are ready. The missiles are ready. All ships are in good condition. Everything is ready. 0134, 0132. Report on your weapons. Nuclear warheads ready. Prepare the ignition." 2 minutes of silence. General Cavino ordered. His eyes were solemn as he counted in his heart. 1, 2, 3, 4. Soviets, welcome the greetings from Washington. In the hidden base on the eastern coast, the long metal passageway almost pierced through the belly of the mountain. In this huge project that spanned dozens of kilometers, even more than 100 kilometers, the hundreds of large arc reactors that supplied energy began to overload. Prepare for near-Earth orbit strike. Prepare the satellite command. He connected to the brainwave controller, locking onto the Soviet Army's target. The satellites had locked onto the Soviet Army's target. All squads, send out infrared signals. Radar stations, get ready for backup. Activate the drone guidance signal. On the light screens of the major bases, a lifelike model of the Earth was displayed. The specific location of the Soviet floating fleet was displayed. Hundreds of signals were sent from different sources and in different ways. The spatial information of every floating battleship was exposed. The huge solid iron ball weighing tens of thousands of tons, after activating the internal high-tech equipment, was sent into orbit deep inside the Earth. Satellite signal is stable. Outer space coordinates are being imported. Earth's rotation data is imported. Trajectory calculation completed. Calculating the ion frequency vibration engine deflection data. The huge electromagnetic coil, based on the acceleration field generator designed by Stark Industries, accumulated a huge kinetic energy and a huge initial velocity that was enough to break through the outer atmosphere and launch the solid warhead weighing tens of thousands of tons. Even though they chose to launch in no man's land, the huge vibration that tore through the air still made the residents of the East Coast feel as if they had been hit by a stick. Their vision darkened, and those who were close to the launch base even bled from their mouths and noses. In the most serious cases, they had already lost their lives. Dozens of electromagnetic cannons with huge kinetic energy crossed the Atlantic Ocean in a few dozen seconds. The UA base in space also threw out hundreds of huge titanium rods, with terrifying kinetic energy that was constantly increasing due to the acceleration, and locked onto the sea where the Soviets were located. "Now, full rudder left," General Carvino roared. He silently counted the time, then abruptly opened his eyes. Under the command of the supercomputer, the huge fleet neatly exposed the side of the bow. The huge, cumbersome ships drew a huge arc in the air, raising their turrets high. The originally unattainable elevation was finally achieved due to the tilt of the hull. Fire in unison. The general felt the violent vibration of the air behind him. The sailors on the deck could not help but look behind them. The dazzling red made them narrow their eyes, but from the corner of their eyes, they could see dozens of huge fireballs with powerful kinetic energy that could destroy the world, rushing towards the Soviets. "You're crazy, General. They'll drag us all to hell." The adjutant cried at General Carvino, but as soon as his voice came out, it was drowned out by the loud noise of the turrets firing in unison. General Carvino looked at the adjutant's nervous face that was distorted. He listened to the deafening roar of the huge cannons. He did not care if the adjutant could hear him or not and said calmly, "I don't plan to go back alive. The Allied fleet will collect our corpses." The vibrating air made it difficult for people to stand steadily. Coupled with the strong vibration of the cannons firing, many soldiers on the deck were thrown into the sea. Missiles were fired and torpedoes were fired. The nuclear warheads fired from the 0134 and 0132 guided missile destroyers and the anti-air hydrogen warhead missiles fired from nuclear submarines accelerated towards the Soviets. On the Soviets' floating flagship, Kane solemnly watched the huge kinetic energy weapons rushing towards him. Hundreds of tungsten rods and titanium rods pierced through the atmosphere. The Red Army soldiers on the floating ships could already hear the rumbling of summer thunder. The sound grew louder and louder, and in a very short period of time, it connected into one. The Red Army soldiers looked up and could see countless dazzling balls of light appearing in the sky. In an extremely short period of time, it started like a meteor shower, and then it became like a dozen suns falling, making it hard for people to open their eyes. Electromagnetic interference is ineffective. The strong magnetic repulsion field was broken in 0.3 seconds. Kinetic interference is ineffective. There is not enough time to deviate from these kinetic weapons. Their trajectories are close to the Earth's surface. It is very difficult for the gravitational trap to work. Countless information poured into Kane's brain. The commander-in-chief of the Soviets, Kane, only waited solemnly and calmly. It was not until the U.S. space-based weapons, kinetic energy weapons, and electromagnetic kinetic energy weapons had broken through the Soviets' 5-second defense circle that he opened his eyes. "Send a signal to our comrades in China." Receive the signal from the Soviets. Also on the flagship, the People's Liberation Army of China nodded in confirmation. Will of China get ready to connect to the network. Beginning positioning of the dimensional membrane. Dimensional membrane positioning successful. Beginning space anchoring. Releasing space anchor. Space bubble system loading. Secondary space platform expanding. Low-dimensional space loading. On the intersecting vector plane between the Soviets' floating fleet and the U.S. kinetic energy weapons. A two-dimensional space membrane silently unfolded and was firmly anchored to the relative space position of the Earth. It was the kinetic energy weapon that first arrived in front of the Soviets' fleet. It was a huge titanium rod with a diameter of nearly 50 meters. It rotated and rubbed against the atmosphere, creating a layer of red free particles that could destroy all magnetic field information interference. The first titanium atom that came into contact with the two-dimensional space membrane suddenly reduced from a nucleus to an infinitely expanding membrane on a flat plane. Its attribute was kinetic energy. All the information, such as the vector, was converted into a kind of information that could not be interpreted in the higher dimensional world and engraved on the space membrane. Under countless incredulous gazes, the hot melting titanium rod was simply swallowed by a layer of translucent light membrane. The high-speed camera could even capture the horrifying scene of the titanium rod slowly melting and penetrating into the light membrane, followed by the second titanium rod, tungsten rod, and steel warhead. All of these carried the power to destroy the world. The kinetic energy weapons and warheads that rushed down from a high altitude were like illusions, smashing in front of a thin layer of light membrane. Without even a ripple, they disappeared into the void. "God, why did you abandon us?" General Kane put down the binoculars in his hand and drew a cross on his chest. He closed his eyes in despair, and turbid water droplets slid down the corners of his eyes. He firmly ordered, "Reload. Fire again." This time, only half of the First Fleet's turrets could still roar. Some people shot at the huge steel monsters in the sky in despair, but more people stopped what they were doing and silently looked at the magnificent fleet in the sky, staring at the translucent membrane. The soldiers of the Republic on the Soviet flagship were busy processing the huge amount of data brought by the dimension-reducing material in the space membrane, firmly controlling the state of the space membrane and the dimensional membrane. Everyone was excited. The commissar stood in the middle of everyone and said to the excited faces, 2 years ago, the apocalypse destroyed our home planet, making us abandon our home, abandon our roots, and wander in a strange dimension. 2 years ago, faced with the apocalypse's meteorite strike, we could only give in despair. How many children have lost their parents? How many young people have lost their lovers? How many friends have gone missing? How many traces of the past have only been left with memories? Our loved ones were destroyed, our dignity trampled, and we were expelled from our homes. Who can forget that meteorite? Who can forget the apocalypse and hatred? Who can forget war, plague, famine, and death? We will not forget. Just like today, the disaster that made us despair in the past has been subdued by us. The power that destroyed us has been controlled by us. And in the future of civilization, this memory will be forever remembered along with the greatness of our civilization. We, the people of China, will not forget. What we have lost, one day we will take back from the apocalypse with our own hands. For the past, forward. The commissar fiercely chopped down with his right hand, and the response was a tsunami of roars. For the Republic, forward. Phase membrane inversion, ready. Preparing for phase reversal of the space membrane. Mirror reflection, phase activated. The relative coordinates modified to negative values. Under the gaze of countless people, a small ripple suddenly appeared in the translucent space membrane. It slowly expanded from a point, then quickly disappeared at the edge, leaving behind a light red color in the space membrane. A layer of light slowly concentrated from the periphery to the center, and a titanium atom suddenly reset, breaking away from the space membrane. As if it had been frozen, with acceleration and kinetic energy, it only changed direction and headed toward the First Fleet. Of course, General Cavino could not see an atom, but he felt a strong sense of fear. He clutched his heart and knelt on the ground. The strong sense of oppression made him unable to breathe, and he could only look at the sky in despair. Then a blazing red titanium rod jumped out of the space membrane, with a powerful kinetic energy that did not weaken in the slightest, and smashed into the John Paul Jones at a speed unimaginable to the U.S. military. The huge guided missile destroyer broke in two like a biscuit, its head and tail folded together, and then was torn to pieces by the huge shockwave that followed. A bottomless pit that reached the bottom of the sea appeared on the surface of the sea, and the seabed rock layer was broken by the impact, followed by a second titanium rod and a third. A meteor shower erupted in front of the First Fleet, and countless bright fireballs smashed into the sea. In just a dozen seconds, this place had become a nightmare. Mushroom clouds rose into the sky with a huge amount of evaporated water vapor, and the strong vibration and sound could be felt throughout the world. Nick silently closed his eyes and walked into the hyperspace transporter. The Avengers were silent and speechless. In this battle, the First Fleet, which gathered all the strength of the U.S. Navy, was destroyed by the kinetic energy weapon reflected by the phase membrane. The joint fleet encountered the ensuing tsunami and was hit hard. The sea gate of the free world opened to the Soviet dictatorship. From the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, the free world could no longer resist the invasion of the Soviet Union. The remaining fleets could only maintain the existence of the free world's navy. The free world's joint army and air force, led by the U.S., resisted step by step on the North American continent, and the Avengers, with the last hope of the free world, directly attacked the core mind controller of the Soviet Union through the hyperspace transporter. They wanted to destroy this evil country by freeing Yuri's evil mind control. Chapter 250. Tomorrow is 515, Chidian's anniversary celebration, the day with the most benefits. Novels. Other than the gift bags and school bags, this time's 515 red envelopes must definitely be flipped through. There was no reason not to snatch the red envelopes. Bruce! Barton exclaimed in surprise. However, this was no longer the time to be surprised. The steel structures around them were filled with powerful energy waves. Natasha stood on the undulating steel pillars beneath her feet. The gigantic buildings in the Avengers Station changed and flowed according to her will, changing the form of matter and energy. Give up. Natasha raised her hands in front of her chest to block. Around the Avenger, the metallic support beneath her feet morphed into an endless number of shapes and forms. Countless weapons appeared in this combination and were aimed at the Avenger's head and vitals. Anyone could feel the danger of those energy weapons. Natasha held on her last shred of hope and warned her former comrade. "Leave this place, or else we'll be enemies." "Then we're already enemies," Captain America said coldly. "That's our position." "You're right. We have no other choice." Natasha stretched out her left hand and clenched it lightly. At this moment, a wave of energy suddenly erupted from the center of her back, and a blazing white pillar of light pierced right through the center of her back. Ripples appeared in the transparent air, and Iron Man's reddish-gold armor faded like water as he emerged from the void. A powerful shockwave was unleashed from his palm, and it exploded less than a foot away from Natasha. Although out of caution, Tani did not give the energy shockwave any damage that could melt metal. The huge physical impact was enough to shatter steel. However, Natasha's body did not even sway. The powerful physical impact seemed to have disappeared, absorbed by her body. Only the Avengers who were facing her could see that her expression was dazed for a moment. Then, as if a burden had been lifted, she relaxed and revealed a smile. Half relaxed and half sad, Natasha muttered to herself, "My stand is very firm. Do you know?" Natasha turned around and said to Stark, "I've long wanted to give that conceited and annoying face of yours a good punch. Does Jarvis have an outreach network?" Natasha asked with a cold smile. "What did you say?" Tani asked. "Looks like there is. I know that. I just want to remind you, Tani, that artificial intelligence is not safe, especially when the other party's technology is several generations ahead of yours." "Jarvis, my apologies, sir. My network has been hacked. System disturbed. JARV. ICE." S voice became more and more vague, intermittent, and the electronic noise increased. Finally, he simply turned off the system of the Iron Man armor, rebooting. Encountered strong signal source interference. Activation failed. System error. High-tech is just unreliable. Huh, isn't it? Natalie nimbly turned around and leaned on Tani's back. She reached out and took off his mask. "Now it's a very solid iron coffin. Thanks to human engineering, your armor fits perfectly with your body. The question now is, how much power can the human body unleash when there's no space to unleash it?" Natasha found the data port of the armor with just a few fumbles. The surrounding liquid metal suddenly extended a silver filament and penetrated into Tani's armor through the gaps of the armor. Countless scrolling Russian data appeared on the optical screen in front of Tani. AI Lenin is repairing the system, modifying the underlying data. 1%, 7%, 87%. Modification complete. The Iron Patriot Soviet is starting. Long live Yuri. Long live the Soviet. Long live the Communist League. Long live the Human Revolutionary Alliance. What the hell? What did you do to my armor? Tani was lying in the Iron Patriot Soviet armor. He couldn't even move a finger. He could only move his eyes and expression to express his anger. Then, his body began to move uncontrollably. No, he was forced to move. The reactivated Iron Patriot locked Stark in his body like a real shackle in prison. At the same time, he stood beside Natalie. "Workers of the world, unite and build an unbreakable Soviet Union." The freshly minted Iron Patriot declared in a firm voice when it was activated. "Our cause is just, and victory will be ours." "What should we do? What should we do?" Tani closed his eyes, and his brain started to work. "Let's start from the fact that we know nothing about the Soviet Union. This operation has already failed. We've practically delivered ourselves to their doorstep, exposing our weaknesses and flaws. No one has a chance. Hulk being imprisoned by those metals, it's definitely not that simple. I've designed an anti-Hulk armor. It's not that easy to trap this big monster. If she thinks that Hulk is out, she'll be in trouble. But she's Natalie. She knows Bruce like the back of her hand. She's familiar with each and every one of us. She knows our weaknesses and weaknesses. She won't make such a mistake. You're right. Natalie's voice suddenly rang in Tawny's ears. He couldn't help but complain. Please. That's Jarvis's headset. And don't peek into my brain. I won't apologize for this offense. Natalie's tone was not bad. Back to the original topic. You guessed it right. I know Bruce better than any of you. Hulk is an invincible monster, but Bruce is just a weak and kind person. Even if he is not restricted by Bruce, Hulk has at least 3 weaknesses. The first is the study of space. This weakness is not so much Hulk's flaw, but rather, it's the horror of others. There is a group of people who have reached the pinnacle of the study of space. For them, even if there are no weaknesses, they can still create weaknesses. And they're the allies of the Soviet Union. China, phase armor. Tawny's tone was low, and he replied with a suppressed tone. Yes, in order to fight against the apocalypse, their study of space has reached a terrifying level. Even their allies are afraid that they will erase themselves along with the world. We are very sure that China has the means to destroy Hulk. But you don't dare. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we will not ask for help from our allies, and they have no time to intervene in our disputes. The entire Republic is preparing for the decisive battle against the apocalypse. This silence is unsettling. So there is the research of the second weakness, the development of physical constants. We have found something that can restrain Hulk, vibranium. Yes, the captain's shield. Natasha nodded, confirming Stark's thoughts. But that is out of print, the only one of its kind. This is the difference between a government and a hero. A hero only cares about what is there, while an organization cares more about why. You have solved vibranium? No, Natasha said openly, but we know some of the principles, thanks to adamantium, thanks to the mutants. What did you say? What mutants? You know the professor and the others? It seems that you did not know everything from the professor. Also, the professor may be trustworthy, but the mutants are definitely not worthy of an alliance. They are more dangerous to you than us. Hulk's third weakness is his infinite anger. This is the easiest place to defeat him. The Supreme Commissar Yuri can easily control him, but unfortunately, he is protected by the professor. Chapter 251. The floating base took 2 days to travel from Shenzhen City to the northern base, and Chu Hong did not say a word along the way. From the South Sea to the south bank of the Yangtze River, this large area was traditionally known as the Huaxiao region, and it was filled with the ashes of destruction. The ground was burned into glass, and new soil was covered by the flood. Looking down from the floating base, there was no trace of life in sight, and this sent a chill down Chu Heng's spine. This was all the species in the biosphere of millions of square kilometers. Countless lives, unlimited futures and possibilities, and even some famous names in the future. Nightmare Demon Emperor, All Dragon, Hun High King, Golden Winged Ra King, White Elephant King, Shirzun. That heroic golden age where all living things competed for freedom and 100 races fought for hegemony was wiped out by the rule of the heavens. How could one not be terrified? Which metahuman could remain indifferent? Chu Hong seemed to see the world where life on Earth multiplied and evolved, where all kinds of intelligent creatures competed to blossom in glory, was forcibly cut off by humans using absolutely terrifying methods, massacring and purging the future. He suddenly recalled the 100 races evaluation of humans in the future, as well as the crazed vengeance that was engraved in their genes. Even if it was meaningless to evolution, they still treated humans as the most precious food, an essential ingredient for feasts and sacrifices. Humans are demons, sinners, and only the blood of sinners can please Mother Earth. Humans have original sins, and it is precisely because humans were cruel and tyrannical when they ruled Earth that they were punished by Mother Earth. Chu Hong suddenly understood the deep-rooted fear the 100 races had towards humans. It was precisely this fear that was written in their genes due to being dominated, slaughtered, preyed on, and abused by humans for a long period of time that caused them to be extremely conceited, crazy, tyrannical, and extremely concerned about humans. It was almost pathological, and they imitated the words and actions of humans, as well as their distorted attitudes towards culture and history. This was the distortion and madness of an ant turning over and becoming its master. The heavy rain and monsoon should have brought the seeds of life. Chu Hung heard someone beside him say in confusion, "Why is the remaining life here and the life that spread over from other places still in a state of stagnation after the flood? Even the expansion of the bacterial population has almost stopped because they are afraid. Fear. Yes, they're afraid of us humans. As long as we have not left this area, no life will dare to reproduce here. How is this possible? Why is it impossible? We've already deciphered part of the alien bacteria's genetic code. The research report contains the collective consciousness of the alien bacteria and the collective subconscious. For their own survival, the alien bacteria will tamper with the host genes, and the genes of life in this area have long been under the control of the alien bacteria, suppressing their urge to reproduce. Our enemy is not just a mindless microorganism, but also an ambitious and highly evolved life form. This is a magnificent evolutionary war, a crossroads of life and death for mankind. Every one of us has the responsibility to sacrifice everything for the continuation and evolution of mankind. We need to re-engrave the dominance of humans in the biosphere of Earth and let the other species in this world understand that their path of evolution is decided by us. We need to engrave their fear of humans in their genes as the most important instinct for survival. I want them to never forget it. The terror of being dominated by humans, the humiliation of adapting to humans. If these species dare to stand up, then they must be prepared to have their spines broken by us. Following the soldier's calm, cold, and murderous declaration, Chu Hung suddenly felt as if his heart was being squeezed by a large hand. He could not breathe, and a chill ran down his spine, as if a blade had brushed past his spine. His entire body trembled, and he shuddered. Why would I be afraid? Aren't I also a human? Chu Hung did not understand. He looked at his hands in a daze, subconsciously ignoring the alien bacteria that the soldier was talking about. The 2-day journey to the floating city was peaceful and uneventful. Even though they had already entered the mutated biosphere upstream of the Yangtze River, there was not a single large group of mutated creatures that dared to offend this floating fleet. Occasionally, there would be mutated birds that unintentionally approached, but when they saw humans, they would show a vigilant and fearful attitude. There was not a single trace of the violence and bloodthirst that Chu Hung had imagined. It was as if their instinct to attack humans had disappeared overnight. 3 months later, Beijing base. Chu Hung, tomorrow is the time to inject the gene suppressor again. Chu Hung was walking on the streets of the Bohai Rim Human Security Base in Beijing and Tianjin, listening to his new friend Feng Huai and to somewhat neurotic complaints. The man was thin, and there was a violent and restless aura around him. Both of them were metahumans, and in this base where ordinary people had an overwhelming advantage in numbers, they easily formed a small circle. Although Chu Hung instinctively wanted to hide, he had already been forced to register, so he had no choice but to act like an ordinary metahuman, disguising himself as an ordinary metahuman. You should have already felt it. The gene suppressor. Hee, it sounds nice, saying that it is to suppress the unstable genes in our bodies and prevent malignant mutations, but who can't feel that this thing is used to suppress our metahumans? My metahuman has already begun to decline. The government is persecuting us. Feng Huai's body twitched, and he nervously rolled his eyes and whispered, "They are afraid of our power, jealous of our abilities." Chu Heng's face was gloomy, and he tried his best to show the attitude of an ordinary metahuman, indignant and cowardly, but he could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. Feng Huai, this idiot, he can't possibly think that the government really does not monitor us, right? I can complain about this in my heart, but saying it out loud will be evidence of my crimes in the future. When the government wants to settle the score, these are all evidence that will kill me. But this idiot is my best disguise. Recently, my progress in metahuman has almost stopped. Without the assistance of the brain nucleus, the efficiency of my metahuman cultivation has already decreased a lot. Ever since I started injecting the gene suppressor last month, my progress has been as slow as a snail. The government wants to destroy all metahumans. I only used 2 months to reach level 15, but in this 1 month, instead of advancing, I have regressed. I can no longer wait. If I continue to wait, the government will trap me to death, and by then, I will become the dog of the rich and powerful. If they want me to live, I will live, and if they want me to die, it will not be a problem. I did not come to this world after rebirth to be a dog for the government. I must escape from here. Chu Hung had made up his mind, but on the surface, he did not show it, still showing his anger, cowardice. At the same time, he also noticed the flash of disdain on Fong Huaiyan's face, and Chu Hung only sneered in his heart. Metahumans are the new humans, the great existence that is more adapted to this world than humans, the beloved children of the Creator. Fong Huaiyan was still babbling on about the superiority of metahumans, the bloodline theory and natural selection theory of metahumans, and Chu Hung still showed the same expression, agreeing with him submissively. But both of them knew that if they dared to say these words to any ordinary person, that person would only need to say, "It doesn't matter if there are evolvers that are more adapted to this world. We humans have always been adapting the world to us. If this world has eliminated humans, then destroy it and transform it into a world that is more suitable for humans." They could only be angry, but they did not dare to say anything. But this time, after Fong Huaiyan finished his cliché, he did not leave. Instead, he looked at Chu Hung mysteriously. Fong Huaiyan looked at Chu Hung from head to toe with a scrutinizing gaze. There was a hint of disdain in his eyes, but he had no choice but to pinch his nose and pretend to be very concerned. He whispered into Chu Hang's ear, "Do you know about Mother Earth?" Chu Hung was half pretending and half really shocked as he asked in confusion, "What?" "The Earth has a spirit, and so do all living things. This spirit belongs to Mother Earth, and so do all living things." Fong Huaiyan's expression was very serious as he recited a sentence that Chu Hung was extremely familiar with. The spirit of man belongs to Mother Earth. It is the eldest son of Mother Earth and the elder brother of all living things. It is loved by Mother Earth and has ruled the earth for 15,000 years. But the spirit of man betrayed Mother Earth. It drank her blood, and so it is guilty. This sin belongs to the spirit, and it is unforgivable and undeniable. It is the original sin of man. Chu Hung followed Fong Huaiyan and recited the prologue of the Mother Earth scripture word by word in his heart. So the Mother Earth religion has already appeared? Chu Hang's heart was in a state of shock. Only he knew the influence of the Mother Earth religion in the future. Mother Earth Saintess Shun Si and would lead her followers to the new world to offer sacrifices in 4 months to obtain the forgiveness of the 100 races. She would then establish the Mother Earth religion that had the greatest influence in the end of the world. Even among the 100 races, there would be a large number of believers. Original sin and celestial nature were the 2 most important ideas in the early days of the Mother Earth religion. The former explained the cause of the end of the world. It was because humans had committed sins. They destroyed the Earth's environment, destroyed all living things created by Mother Earth, and oppressed and enslaved their own brothers. Therefore, they drank Mother Earth's blood and were guilty of original sin, so they were punished. As for the celestial nature, the sinless mutated creatures were sent by Mother Earth to punish humans. Because the souls of humans were sinful, everyone, including infants, were sinful. They had to suffer and suffer in this world until they had redeemed their sins before returning to Mother Earth's embrace. Therefore, all the disasters that humans have suffered are deserved punishments, and the mutated creatures will represent Mother Earth to punish us. They will use our blood to cleanse Mother Earth's blood. Mutated creatures are equal to humans. In order to forgive the sins of humans, Mother Earth awakened the souls of a portion of the righteous, granting them great powers. Thus, the great powers with spirits redeemed their sins. The sinners will have to suffer for generations to come, and this is the only way to return to Mother Earth's embrace. Officer Lin from the base frowned and finished reading the words on the document in his hand with a steely expression. Suddenly, he threw the document on the ground. What the hell is this? Old Lin, don't be angry. This is the document we seized from a portion of the suspects who continued to commit crimes. It seems like it was created by a Chinese woman who called herself Saint Asian, and it came from the United States. Those metahumans think that we are persecuting them by modifying their chaos genes. Old Lin pointed at the document beneath his feet and sneered. So they want to be the boss after creating these things? He looked at the portrait of the so-called saintess and beneath his feet and spat on it. Damn retards. Metahumans, since they don't want to be humans anymore. Then let them be ghosts. If we don't teach them a lesson, they won't know what imperialism is. Chapter 252. What kind of world have I come to? Chu Hong carefully controlled the steel bars in his body to support his body and looked around in despair. Under his feet was a dark brown glass-like crystal. With Chu Hong as the center, there was a huge crater with a diameter of about 5 kilometers. It was covered with crystal-like armor plates formed by high temperature and pressure. Chu Hong felt that his mind was in a mess. Countless fragmented memories were surging in his mind. He had just been violently hit, and the dull pain in the back of his head made it impossible for him to form a coherent memory. All the images turned into fragmented light and shadow, flashing past one by one. Hello, everyone. This is News 30. Regarding the Mayan doomsday prophecy that everyone is concerned about, we have invited Professor Liu, an expert in American history from Yenjing University, and Professor Wu, an astronomy professor from Fudan University, to explain the strange phenomena that happened yesterday. The Great Plague in North America has caused at least 200,000 deaths, and more than 5 million people have been infected. Our country has suspended all public activities. The Superpower Registration Bill has been officially passed by the United Nations General Assembly in Antarctica. There are 5 major human reserves. The Antarctic Reserve. Last night, the Antarctic base fell in the beast tide. 1. 7 million survivors are confirmed dead, and the remaining 3 million people have lost contact. The Human Coalition government has announced to open all industrial information and technological databases to all survivor bases. All we can do is to preserve a trace of hope for humanity. The United States has announced the abolition of the Superpower Management and Supervision Bill. The Washington government has been destroyed in the subsequent attack by the Feather Race. All the major survivor bases in North America have declared autonomy. At the same time, a new company law has been passed, recognizing the administrative and judicial powers of cross-base companies. At the same time, each sub-base retains the power to legislate. The king of superpowers, Zhao Luo, has announced his coronation in the Jiangnan base, becoming the first king of superpowers and establishing a royal family. The Jiangnan base has issued a Bill of Rights for superpowers. Superpowers will be granted limited judicial immunity in the Jiangnan base. The Zhao family has announced the death of all those who participated in the protest on the charge of great disrespect. The new Los Angeles base has passed the aristocratic law, recognizing the families established by the kings of superpowers all over the world as having aristocratic rights. At the same time, it has established 3 human classes: aristocrats, citizens, and commoners. It is the first survivor base in the world to recognize aristocrats as slaves. The lower-class commoners have launched a massive uprising. The entire families of the insurgents have been expelled from the base. They have become food for the Feather Race. On the internet, a young member of the Zhao clan invited the Feather Race to a banquet. During the banquet, there was a scandal of cannibalism, and the ability user Qiao Qian was sentenced to death. The Jiangnan king, Zhao Luo, personally acted and killed the ability user who participated in the rebellion. Jiangnan base will announce that this scandal is not true, and at the same time, we will establish a network censorship system for Jiangnan base. King Mengshan has announced an alliance with the Feather Clan, and has recognized the royal clan of the Feather Clan as the nobles in Mengshan City. The Mother Earth religion became the #1 religion in the world. The king of the winged race admitted to being baptized and converted to Mother Earth. The governments of the various countries were declared illegal by the 100 Cities Alliance. King of Mengshan. Alien cannibalism is the same as human cannibalism of other animals. It is a national culture. Following the excruciating pain in Chu Heng's head, the memory fragments seemed to slowly converge and formed a rough outline along the timeline. This is my memory before my rebirth. There's no mistaking it. Why do I feel like I have forgotten something important? But no, before my rebirth, the human government had not been outlawed yet. These memories, are these memories from my rebirth? What was going on? My memory is complete, so were these extra things? Chu Heng looked up to the sky and howled in pain. The metal in his body was embedded in his broken bones, allowing him to stand up again. Along with the heart-wrenching pain and numbness, Chu Heng finally felt the end of the river of memories. He felt that his sore, swollen, and itchy brain had touched the most secret place. The first thing he recalled was an icon. He was very familiar with this icon, but it was a very strange icon in the apocalypse. It was the first icon that surfaced in his memory in a profound and shocking way. It was the brightest flag among the mountains of corpses and seas of blood of mutated creatures. It was an unforgettable scene. Chu Heng could clearly feel that although the memory of that scene had inexplicably appeared in his memory, it was already unforgettable. It was as if he was in another time and space, and he had not transmigrated. It was the most profound memory that he had ever had. The 5-star red flag fluttered in the wind. The song of victory was so loud. In the sky of Chu Heng's memory, a battleship tore through the sea of clouds. Accompanied by the golden sunlight, it completely tore apart the gloomy sky of the apocalypse. Thousands of meters long laser blades were like golden wings on both sides of the cross-shaped battleship. They slowly unfolded and cut down the Feather Race members floating under the clouds like harvesting wheat. The sky was raining blood and dismembered corpses. The bright flag at the lower abdomen of the battleship shone brightly under the golden sunlight. It became an unerasable memory for all the survivors in the base below. Beginning to retract the world lines. Salvation Army D-5-982 Core, get ready. Space-time anchoring. Starting to retract the negative world lines with the space-time of the Dimensional Warriors as the origin. This world-saving operation will be supported by the dimensional points numbered J-342 to J-351. The headquarters agrees. Destroy the world lines with a deviation of -93. 8 and above. Destroy any possibility of human extinction and any possibility of human deterioration. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, we will not give up. But if there is no hope, then let it perish. Carry out redemption for the world lines with a deviation of 0 to 93. 8. Deploy the interstellar defense system for the development and continuation of human civilization to the timeline with a deviation of more than 0. On the Galaxy Strategic Cruiser Jiangsu, the multidimensional United Front Command of the People's Republic of the Multiverse was methodically arranging the space-time dimensional anchoring of the entire timeline of this plane. For the entire Salvation Army, there was already an established procedure for this kind of work. First, destroy the dimensions without human beings and destroy all the plane systems that led to the demise of human beings. In this case, the main body of the Republic would generally need to eliminate the information of those worlds in a higher dimension. When the correct timeline of the plane was determined and chosen, the Salvation Army would locate the origin of the timeline, which was the key point of the disaster. The timeline would be divided into 2 major systems: the normal standard timeline and the doomsday timeline after the disaster. Yang Qi activated the dimensional membrane projection system on the Gongon. A simple but extremely complicated projection of Earth appeared in the command cabin of the Gongon. In Yang Qi's eyes, This was a projection of countless overlapping shadows of Earth, each of which represented a plane of Earth. Commander Yang-Chi, the dimensional space-time anchoring has been successful, with a meteorite carrying alien bacteria entering Earth at around 8:21 p.m. Beijing time on December 21st, 2012. The timeline is 0. So, with the virus completely breaking out on December 31st and the large-scale erosion of Earth as the key point, -1. 1. Confirm the destruction of the world above the timeline, -93. 8:1. Destruction confirmed. Prepare the dimensional shock weapon, heat death generator, chaos virus, super light ion accelerator, universe structure shaker. Apply to the Dimensional War Command Center for information elimination and wipe out the other worlds of this universe. The voice of the artificial intelligence system did not tremble in the slightest. It still asked calmly, confirm to deploy the interstellar defense system for the development and continuation of human civilization to the positive plane of origin, 0. 0. Confirm deployment. On the night of December 21st, 2012, Houston Observatory. Washington, this is Houston. We have just detected an asteroid with a diameter of nearly 1 kilometer flying towards Earth. There is an 87% chance of impact. Requesting space-based weapon support. Where is the impact point? In Canada, near the Arctic Circle. Houston, is this meteorite a threat? This is an ice-based meteorite. It is not a threat to the United States. It will disintegrate when it enters the atmosphere and lose most of its volume. The most pessimistic possibility is that it will only have a part of its lethality left. However, its landing point is in no man's land, so it will not cause large-scale damage. Maintain satellite monitoring. Ignore everything else. In space, a cold blue meteorite flew towards Earth at a speed that was not considered fast in the universe, but was quite dangerous in the Earth's speed. In the center of its ice layer, some microorganisms that had not lost their vitality were sleeping. In just 30 minutes, it would fall into the periphery of the Arctic Circle in Nunavut, Canada. At this moment, a stream of information came from the depths of the universe. Anchor point plane, lock on matter matrix moon. Development and continuation of human civilization. Interstellar defense system loading. Matter intelligence completed. Quantum intelligence successfully established. Spacetime anchor completed. Loading weapon data. Lock on threat. Meteorite number 186486536. Carrying carbon-based biochemical bacteria EE187628. Meteorite will enter the atmosphere in 13 minutes and 23 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7. Launch confirmed. Houston Observatory. Washington, the satellite has observed a situation. Emergency. Reporting to Washington. Reporting to Washington. Washington, D.C. Moon, look at the moon. Accept this signal from the satellite. I sent you. Houston, the moon is changing shape? Yes, you're right. Oh my God, aliens are right beside us. In space, the moon was like a blooming chrysanthemum. The side facing away from Earth unfolded a slender shell that looked like countless petals, forming an energy shield composed of countless material structures and a layer of energy light film. The Star Destroyer cannon in the center instantly locked on to the meteorite coming towards Earth. In the next moment, the only thing the satellite could see was light. The intense light instantly caused the camera to lose control. The next moment, the energy wave evaporated all matter within a 45-degree angle on the side of Earth facing the meteorite. Lock on the source of the meteorite. Pegasus 16769-167 AY-71698 planet. Ready the Star Destroyer cannon. Spacetime vector distortion locked on. Super Spacetime, strike 10. 9, 8, 7, 2, 1, fire. In the space-time dimension, this was a scene that had been repeated countless times on Earth before the meteorite arrived. Whether it was dinosaurs or primitive humans living on Earth, whether humans had the ability to see this scene in space or not, at this moment, the defense system deployed on the moon had erased all traces of the existence of special biochemical bacteria in the entire universe. The planet 167691667 AY 71698 in the Pegasus constellation had mysteriously disappeared from the universe, disappearing from the history of mankind. In the world with the negative origin of the dimension, wherever the sun rose at dawn, a dazzling light dazzled the eyes of the survivors. Salvation Army, descend. Chapter 253. Beijing, New York, Mexico, London, Paris, Tokyo, Los Angeles. The ruins were mottled with wreckage and broken walls. Almost no one survived in these cities. Survivors rushed over from all directions and looked at everything in front of them in shock. Those who had lost their loved ones were crying in despair in the ruins. In this war, 42 countries were destroyed forever, and more than 400 million people were sacrificed in this war. Today is the Independence Day of the United States. The President of the United States gave a speech on the ruins of the White House. It is also a day worth remembering by the people of the world. Today, in just a few days, mankind has encountered intelligent creatures other than ourselves for the first time. What it brings us is eternal pain and hatred. History will remember this day. It will remember the unfortunate disaster. It will remember the 400 million innocent people who died because of the most blatant malice in the universe. It will remember the 6 million soldiers of 125 countries who sacrificed their lives to protect Earth for the survival and freedom of mankind. The President of the United States raised his arms emotionally. Since the birth of history, we have never had a heart so closely united. Today, I will forget which country and which nation we are from, and remember the same identity, fellow human beings. It is the grief of losing our loved ones and the flames of hatred that unite us. In the face of the invasion of aliens, the disputes between human races are so ridiculous. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no intention of criticizing what we have done in the past, but after today, we must let go of all the disputes and differences and return to the same position, because they will make a comeback. It had been 25 years since the Independence Day War. The tragic war from 20 years ago still left a shadow in the human memory. Not to mention the encirclement and annihilation of the remaining alien troops in Africa, South America, and Central Asia. The remaining alien troops were cleaned up one after another. Almost every family wore mourning clothes on Memorial Day every year. Memorial Day became one of the most important festivals on Earth to commemorate loved ones and remember the war. Everyone knew that the aliens would not give up. One day, they would definitely make a comeback. In order to monitor and defend against the alien fleet, the United Nations established the Space Defense Joint Agency. China took the lead in establishing an outpost on the moon, and the United States was responsible for the monitoring base on Saturn's ring. In the face of a survival crisis, humans finally showed their perseverance and unity. They voluntarily gave up most offensive military facilities and devoted all human strength to defending against aliens and developing interstellar technology. Moon Base, Global Joint Defense Agency. General Yang, the United Nations believes that you need to use cloning technology carefully. We have examined at least 2,300 unconscious clones on the moon base, and the oldest one has been sealed for 19 years. The governments of the various countries support the moon base with $80 billion every year, not so that you can waste your precious resources on this place. I remember that China would submit a report to the National Audit Office every year. Every cent of your money is guaranteed to be used in the most critical areas. General Yang pushed open the door to the second floor of the base. His eyes swept across the rows of ceramic cultivation nests. Under the green nutrient solution, the bodies of the soldiers who had been sleeping for many years were pale and pale. Beneath the sturdy and uniform muscles were powerful explosive power and vitality. These modified human bodies possessed the most perfect dynamic vision and reflexes. They were the most perfect warriors of mankind. It was just that these warriors were all sleeping in this narrow breeding nest. They had no souls or consciousness. You should have read the report we submitted. Doctor, General Yang gently brushed away the dust on the nests and turned to Professor Frank. These are the descending bodies of the future soldiers. Ing Long, 2020. They are spirit-enhanced, descending bodies in a zero-gravity space environment. In the future war, we alone have no chance of winning. We need the support of our compatriots from other dimensions. Frank shook his head. We don't have any concrete evidence to prove that it was a signal from another dimension. Although this information carried a large amount of technology and helped mankind achieve a breakthrough in interstellar warfare, the disaster 25 years ago taught us that this world is dangerous. We can't pin our hopes on an unknown signal. You don't understand? General Yang sighed. That is our compatriots, another great civilization and country. China is the pillar of the Joint Defense Agency. It can be said that the human space era was supported by two countries, China and the United States. Because of this, they have a right to speak on equal terms with us. We need their strength in space development, and they also need our dominance over the global industry. The world is increasingly divided into two camps, us and China. The depth of cooperation between the two camps and the high degree of information sharing have reduced global conflicts by 90% after independence. But because of this, China's peaceful rise has been tolerated. The young female president put down her pen. Since independence, due to the mental pollution of aliens or some other reason, a group of listeners who claim to be able to receive information from other dimensions have appeared. A large number of individuals suspected to be the descending bodies of the information have joined the decision-making and military of China. They have deciphered a large amount of technical information, allowing China to become a superpower in space. Because of this, they have diverged from us in terms of defense. They hope to guide the human civilization from another dimension to descend, and that civilization has close ties with China. Your Excellency, do you mean that China might be an extraterrestrial civilization? A member of parliament questioned. At present, there is no evidence to prove this. That dimensional civilization is very far from Earth and can only be projected into our world in the form of information bodies. But they have already issued a warning to us. For human civilization, a disaster is imminent, and they will fight to the death for mankind. The descenders are not awake, Your Excellency. They are still in a half-asleep state and have not recalled their memories before their arrival. But we can be sure that it will not be long before they awaken. An expert stood up and explained. When it came to sensitive topics, the atmosphere of the meeting suddenly became intense. The Declaration of Unity established since independence and the long-term hegemony of the United States caused the entire meeting room to enter into a fierce argument. At this moment, a staff officer barged into the meeting room. Chapter 254. South America, Hydra Headquarters. In South America, Hydra's political influence was deeply rooted, and even its military strength was extraordinary. In this land, known as the back garden of the United States, the poppy called Nazi grew. Under the protection of the shield controlled by Hydra, it was like a cancer, growing stronger day by day. After the end of World War II, a considerable number of Nazi war criminals fled to South America and were also sheltered by many South American countries. Because Brazil had sent an expeditionary force to join the Allied forces, it took a clear stand against fascism. But other countries were not like this, especially Argentina, which accepted many Nazi fugitives and provided protection. Of course, there was also the shadow of Hydra behind this. Wolfgang von Citrick. Adolf calmly looked at the uneasy man in front of him. You really disappoint me. When you commanded the leader of the Skull Commando and the Nazi Air Force, it was a disgrace to us. Now it seems that after so many years, you haven't made any progress. Your Excellency Führer. Citrick opened his mouth to explain. Hitler raised his hand to stop him. You don't understand the difference between me and you. Even if my motherland and my people see me as the Devil King today, I still firmly believe that what I do is just. I'm not a perfect leader. My former thoughts, Nazism had many mistakes limited to the times, but I have always been committed to fighting against corruption. Citrick, you will never understand that victory and failure are not the end of our pursuit. The path we should adhere to is to struggle, to fight. Others think that the German tanks are naturally powerful, but citric, don't you know? In the early days of the Nazi Party's rise, how weak was Germany, a defeated country that had been exploited for 20 years? The government, the greedy nobles, the incompetent generals, the cowardly soldiers, and the entire Europe that stood against us. This country has been rotting for 20 years. But are we afraid of these? No, they should be afraid of us. We let them know that the end is near. We tell them that judgment is coming. Because we've always been fighting against these rotten things, we naturally have everything. On the battlefield, the lads died for the Nazis, not because we brainwashed them, but because we once fought for them, and now we're leading them to fight. We're not doing this for ourselves, but for Germany. Hitler stared at Citric, watching him sweating profusely. The short man, standing in front of him, was even taller than the tall man. Citric, you made the Nazis lose their motherland. We don't even know who we're fighting for. Now that the German people have made their choice, we have no one to rely on. Princeps Sickwick was even more afraid. Although Hydra was under his control, this unarmed man magically had the power to frighten him. Hitler put on his old military cap and, ignoring him, pushed open the door and went out. Citric's hands pressed on the gun at his waist several times, but his trembling hands and the fear in his heart prevented him from making up his mind. The man who once loomed over his head had returned, and this time his shadow was even stronger. Even as an ordinary person, he couldn't fight back at all. The door was already full of Hydra agents, and they looked at the familiar man standing in front of them. Loyal soldiers of Nazism. Hitler gazed deeply at the soldiers who followed his ideology. He lowered his head for a moment to hide the tears in his eyes. You have fought for me long enough. Today, it is my turn to fight for you. I will stand up and create a new world for you, a world under the sun. Today, you don't have to be loyal to the Hydra. The Hydra should be loyal to you, and the Nazi should be loyal to you. Together, let us create a new world, welcome the arrival of the apocalypse, and fight against the apocalypse. Hitler raised his hands and roared with all his might. No one doubted his sincerity and determination. Long live, long live, long live Hitler! Everyone shouted fanatically, and Hydra was boiling at this moment. Half a day later, the Hydra emblem was taken off, and the Nazi soldiers wearing the swastika symbol took over the entire Hydra base. This group of Hydra, without a leader, had a real dragon head. Things are going better than I thought. Hitler, standing in front of the mind controller, looked at Yuri's big bald head on the projection, smiled, and said, "You remind me of Stalin, who fought all his life and finally lost to those rotten things. Steel, tough, strong, firm, but difficult to resist corrosion and oxidation. Führer, maybe I should call you the dictator of South America and Africa now." Yuri sneered. "There will never be a day when we recognize the Nazis. We will be mortal enemies. But in the face of the enemy, we still have the basis for a deal." Hitler said calmly, "Like the Soviet-German treaty, we all know that it will be torn up one day, but this does not prevent us from cooperating now. What's more, the apocalypse has already paid you. When I encountered the apocalypse, I once said, since the ideal requires us to cooperate with the demons, why not find the most powerful one? Now you're not the most powerful demon. Where's the thing that the apocalypse gave you?" Yuri spread out his hands and asked. Hitler put a translucent pill in the palm of Yuri's virtual image. With the slight fluctuation of Yuri's illusion, the translucent pill gradually became transparent and finally became the same illusion as Yuri and fell into Yuri's palm. This is NZT-48. From the analysis of the components, it is a stimulant, but it has very serious side effects. Can it be overcome? Yuri carefully observed the gift from the demon in his palm. It's difficult to change the body's nervous system and affect the brain, but we are confident to overcome the impact on the organs. In other words, it will not damage the body, but will cause irreversible changes to the human nervous system, and people who take this drug for a long time will no longer have negative emotions. In fact, they will become rational to the point of indifference. It's hard to say whether this is the side effect or the main effect, but it can help us focus and even make our will stronger. Of course, after stopping taking it, people will feel anxious, fearful, uneasy, and angry. It's a kind of mental pain, the pain of becoming a mediocre person physically and psychologically. If the nervous system is not completely mutated, then the user can deeply feel what hell is. Generally speaking, how long does it take for the nervous system to mutate? Yuri asked. Hitler was silent for a moment before replying. It will take 3 years, but there is a direction for improvement. Yuri paused for a moment and said to Hitler, I will send Soviet scientists to you. I have something else here that will help our cooperation project. In a Nazi laboratory, a large number of researchers worked in an orderly manner in the huge laboratory. The scientists walked between the test benches. In the center of the tightest security, a row of liquids of various colors was carefully placed in a thermostatic safe, with a label on it. Super Soldier Serum Infinite Formula Lizard Serum Osborne Human Enhancement Serum. Incomplete. Professor X Serum X Weapon Serum Mutant Serum Bank Sentinel Project. Incomplete. GH325 MGHD. Light Wakanda Unknown Plant Extract Extremis Virus in the middle of these precious samples. There is an empty test tube with the same name as the experimental project. New Hope. This is the new hope of mankind, the savior of the apocalyptic revelation. Yuri hopes to find new hope for the next age of human evolution, and Hitler is looking for new hope to create a new, perfect Aryan race that surpasses the old humans. They have almost exhausted their ability to collect all the successful and unsuccessful human enhancement drugs in the two worlds, trying to find a new direction in these crystallization of human wisdom. Looking for new hope. Chapter 255. On the outskirts of Mexico City, at the border between the urban civilization and the slums, the Mexican poor people who got up early looked at the motorcade moving on the road in horror. The blackened, metallic motorcade stretched out nearly 2 kilometers in length, driving silently on the road leading to the outskirts of Mexico City. The neat and orderly motorcade was incompatible with the country, exuding a cold, steel-like aura of death. The poor people struggling in the slums were surprised to see the gangsters and drug lords, who used to be insufferably arrogant and regulated the law and order of the slums, kneeling on both sides of the road and shivering. Soldiers in old military uniforms from World War II stood quietly on the main roads. Their uniforms, weapons, vehicles, and tools had 2 very conspicuous symbols, a skull surrounded by a hydra in the center and the famous Tau. No one dared to speak. Everything happened in tacit silence. Even the noisiest and most naughty children had their mouths covered by their parents. It was already early in the morning in the slums, so it was as quiet as a ghost town. In such a large, messy area, only the sounds of animals, the wind breaking the silence, and the sound of the soldiers moving quietly could be heard. Occasionally, a faint whimper could be heard with their hands covering their mouths and noses, followed by a muffled gunshot, like the sound of firecrackers through a layer of quilt. Corpses of gangsters were constantly dragged out of the dilapidated houses, or from the luxurious houses that were very conspicuous in the slums. Pairs of frightened eyes looked at everything through the cracks of their doors, peeping at the blood and smell that had been diluted by the water. Soon, everyone received a notice. Along with the notice, a silver metal number plate was stuffed into their hands. According to the number plate, they had to go to the hospital near their homes at a specific time. The hospital was a small military camp that had been quickly built. No one had any objections. They obediently obeyed the huge, terrible, and dangerous machine in front of them. They obeyed the cold, mechanical system. The priest of the Cathedral of Our Lady of Guadalupe held up a Bible to stop the strangers who wanted to break into the church. What are you doing? This is a church. The Lord does not allow you to bring guns in. This is the holy place where the Virgin rested. It is not a place that you can desecrate. The priest thought that he had encountered gangsters who did not abide by the rules, so he bravely went up to them and scolded them. In this place where the Catholic faith had a deep foundation, priests had more power than the government. Even the gangs and drug lords had to show their piety and humility. Of course, this had nothing to do with kindness or faith. It was the powerful power that dominated the spiritual world. It was the power of the Catholic Church in this land that made them fear it. But when a small man standing in the middle of the group raised his head, the priest showed an expression that he would not have even if he saw a demon. He widened his eyes and pointed at the small man in horror, his face pale with fright. The determined priest followed the footsteps of the little man and retreated step by step. Shock, fear, and despair flashed across his face. "You know me?" Adolphe lowered his head calmly and asked the priest who had collapsed on the ground. "M.O. Devil." The priest couldn't breathe and pointed at him with a trembling finger. "I commanded millions of heroes, but now there is no one left. I once swept through the 3 continents, but now there is no place to stand. Jesus is far better than me. He did not have a single soldier, and he did not occupy any land, but his kingdom is built in the hearts of millions." Adolphe looked at the statue of the Virgin Mary and sighed. Napoleon was a great hero. He actually admitted his failure like this. Adolphe turned to look at the priest and said, "I know that you see me the same way. You despise my cruelty and my army. You despise my country and my achievements. Because the kingdom of Jesus is eternal, but I have no place to stand." "Devil," the priest said in fear, "compared to the Lord, you're only fit to wail in the flames of hell." "Faith, I know this power. I've used this power before. I know it better than any of you. Is there a fact that you've never thought about? You've never seen the Lord, and you've never felt his power, but you're still devout and believe that it's sacred, just like most people in this world. Do you know? I have seen him, the one you call Jehovah, the one you worship as sacred, the one who created mankind, the one who dominates this world. He is an Easterner. God is a Chinese." Adolphe's tone was slightly agitated, but he spoke to the priest without any malice. "God." The priest crossed his chest and looked at him with a gaze that hated heresy. Adolphe did not care. He only said with some frustration, "This made me confirm one thing. The God in the Bible does not exist." Then I realized, why? This is such an obvious fact. How can a lame lie from the 1st century BC deceive the devout faith of nearly 2 billion people in this era of science? Why can it dominate your spiritual world and become the uncrowned king? Why? Then I finally realized one thing. While all the laws and truths of this world are dominated by science, there's a place that is hidden in the fog. That is the study of mankind itself. I'm not talking about the study of the human body, but the study of human consciousness, personality, genes, and all the materialization of this concept. That is to say, the foundation of all research is to study human beings as human beings and never look at human beings from the most fundamental perspective. That is to say, human beings are not studied as human beings, but as a concept of materialization, an objective object, an animal that can be dissected, and an evolving primate. All ignorance is because it is not scientific. When I realized this, I could finally say, humans are simple, and we can easily control them. The priest looked like he was looking at a madman, but Adolphe did not care. He just calmly summoned an SS soldier and took out a tube of light blue liquid from his metal suitcase. 2 officers propped up the priest. Adolphe took out the syringe, rolled up the priest's sleeve, and calmly inserted the syringe into the priest's vein. I know that in this land, some psychotropic drugs and stimulants are very popular. Adolphe injected the drug and asked the priest, "I believe that there must be devout believers and priests who are unfortunate enough to be infected with those things. Do they rely on the power of faith to defeat those things? After being tempted by the devil, there is nowhere to run other than to repent and hand over the soul to the Lord." The priest said with a trembling voice, "Humans are simple, and the human spirit is also simple. Personality is just a short period of time, and the content is not rich enough. It's just a stress response of brain hormones. When ethics and morality imprison this mystery, it is mysterious and sacred, but when the light of science shines in, we destroy, reconstruct, study, control, toy with modify, and use the most violent and direct methods to touch its essence, it is worthless. Many people think that willpower and faith are powerful, but that's only if no one forces it, and there's no power to violate it. If there is, then the domination of consciousness is the same as death. It's not something willpower and faith can control. Being controlled is the same as being killed, and it becomes an objective existence. The human spirit is not as sacred as they think it is. It is something that can be objectively controlled, modified, and manipulated, and the study of this objective object is the study of human control. Adolf roared loudly. He waved his right hand crazily. Germany's technology is the best in the world. Our research on human consciousness, humans, and everything that makes up their spirit has touched the most fundamental law. We know how to control your thoughts, emotions, consciousness, and subconsciousness. This means that the control of humans has finally touched the spirit. From now on, the throne of your spirit world will be handed over to me by Jesus. The state, the system, will be like religion, ruling over your soul. Oh God! The priest reached out his withered hands and hugged the cross on the altar. But he didn't have the strength to stop the changes. On his skinny hands, blood vessels bulged out, like purplish-red chains wrapping around his body. His body shriveled even more, as if all his life force had been sucked out of his body by those strange blood vessels. On his skeleton-like skull, 2 canine teeth slowly protruded, going past his lower lip. The tall priest finally shrunk into a mummy less than half the height of a human. Adolf watched it all happen attentively. In the end, he asked someone to carry up a coffin-like container. Through the crystal-like material, he could see the flowing red liquid inside. An SS officer carefully lifted the mummy and put it into the crystal coffin. The withered corpse absorbed the red liquid into its body like a sponge. The dead gray skin fell off the mummy. Miraculously, it swelled up again as if it was full of life. The ruddy skin broke free from the dead shell. A tall and handsome young man, like the priest when he was young, but even more handsome, broke free from the crystal coffin. He kissed Hitler's toes devoutly, looking at Hitler as if he were his own father. "What have you done?" says the Lord. "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. He has opened his mouth and accepted your brother's blood from your hand. Now you will be cursed from this land. You farm, the land will no longer work for you. You will wander on the earth." Hitler looked at a certain direction in the sky. As if he was prophesying, he chanted into him, "You are the Alpha, you are the Omega, you are the beginning, you are the end, you are the present, you will always be in case sighting." In the deepest part of the Earth's space-time, Chenong watched it all happen with great interest. In the Nazi Hydra base, the remains of a large number of German soldiers who died in World War II were excavated by the SS. These remains, with only DNA left, were placed in the same crystal coffins. Hydra even opened the blood bank established for scientific research and blood transfusion during World War II, injecting the genetic material from World War II into a mixture of blue and red petri dishes. With the injection of the drug, a German soldier who had been decayed into a mummy suddenly took a deep breath, and his body peeled off like a shell. One by one, the corpses sat up again, and with the injection of the red liquid, they quickly plump up. Hitler watched it all happen, and he trembled as he watched it all happen. Today, war has become a mysterious science, a distant news, a concept that exists in people's minds. Most people in the world don't understand war. Some people think they do. In Afghanistan, in Africa, in the Middle East, they think war is around them, but it's not enough. They mistakenly mistook turmoil for war and forgot that when a nation or a country was on the brink of life and death, that kind of struggle with everything they had. War was not child's play. War was not holy, nor was it evil, but it was a necessity. Now is the time of necessity. I brought war to this world, not for war itself, but for what is behind it, the thing that is vital to us, the determination to survive. If we lose our humanity, we will lose a lot, but if we lose our bestiality, we will lose everything. War will become a very natural thing again, and it is the most necessary thing in daily life. War is life. Heil Hitler. In Brazil, in Chile, in Mexico, in Uruguay, in Argentina, a terrible system slowly operated. Under the control of this system, the old, the dead, and the corpses were first injected with diluted blue drugs, then the daily drinking water of South Americans, the drugs of patients in hospitals. In this poor, chaotic continent, the government carried out a crazy plan with unprecedented efficiency. The corpses from all over the world stood up again. Hitler looked silently at the gift that Shannon gave him. On it was written in beautiful cursive script, "For the Lich King." Ice magic box from Asgard. Ice is your throne. Z virus, G virus from the Umbrella Corporation. Death is your dependent. Time gem from Thanos. The past will eventually decay. Technology matrix, intelligent reconstruction of material control authority from the War Messenger. And you will be crowned king. Chapter 256. The situation is really bad right now. Even Stark is pressuring me. Director Nick pushed open the office door and said to the guest, "Now, the world is increasingly divided into 5 camps, and the cracks between them are deepening. In order to protect themselves, each political body is closing itself off. The human world has never been so divided." Nick looked at the map hanging on the wall facing the door. On it, the deep red of the Soviet Union stretched from Eastern Europe in the west to the Bering Strait in the east, like a giant bear lying in the north overlooking the world. The bright red of China, centered on the rooster, swept across East and Southeast Asia, and even occupied Australia and New Zealand. The light red of Europe, from Norway to the Mediterranean rim, included the essence of the entire Europe. The Red Alliance of the IPL firmly controlled the entire Eurasian continent, and its tentacles extended to the 5 continents and 7 oceans. Just looking at the map was enough to make people breathless. Only some parts of the South Asian subcontinent and the Middle East were still struggling in this red ocean. God bless, the IPL is not united internally. They have different development routes, so the military alliance between them is not strong. The European Communist Party has no intention of conflict with us, and China has no interest in us at all. Only the Soviet Union has been putting pressure on us, but fortunately, their focus of expansion is on the other side of the Tesseract. The guest didn't seem to be happy. He just said calmly, "This has seriously affected our relationship with our ally, the Asgardians." They said that the madness and the tendency for war that humans have shown in the universe, and their self-destruction has terrified the world. Many races have a negative view of us. But that was done by the Soviets, and we're their natural allies. Nick retorted, "Positions change all the time, but race is the only one. Nick, you can never change the fact that we are all humans. In their eyes, we are all the same. Although the evil forces under the Thanos are unlucky, the coldness, cruelty, and ruthlessness that humans have shown have made the forces of justice in the universe feel uneasy." The guest sighed. The Soviets are too capable. They have bathed the entire star field in blood, and they are becoming more and more terrifying. The Asgardians warned us that the Soviets, every Soviet, is beginning to show the temperament of the deep and ancient evils of the universe. They are abandoning everything in order to survive. Beyond the huge red area, the blue that symbolized freedom in North America and England was squeezed into this small area on the map. There were small areas in Africa, but the larger areas in South America and Africa were occupied by a kind of steel greenish-black, like the color of the Iron Cross emblem. It was close to Mexico, close to Egypt, close to South Africa. The Nazis, who have made a comeback, are insane people that have never appeared in human history. They have extended their hands into the most taboo areas in the field of science, such as race, genetics, anti-ethics and resurrection, mutants, viruses, mutations, radiation, and biochemistry. Every evil that humans can imagine has been exploited to the fullest by this government. They have truly become a scientific country, trampling on the dignity of humans, researching how to enslave humans. The 2 people in the room suddenly fell silent, and the uneasy air spread in places where they could not see. A government without a bottom line is terrible. We have no way to deal with it, except for war. But the most impossible thing is war because we can't afford it anymore. Nick recalled the quarrels in the meeting again and again. Today, when international trade and globalization were completely bankrupt, all the principles and political systems that the United States adhered to had lost their economic significance. If they did not want to be completely dragged into the abyss, they had to come up with a new set of methods. Methods that everyone knew. Totalitarianism, authoritarianism, dictatorship, big government, imperialism. There were many words to describe it, but the core would never change: control. Stark and the Department of Defense have almost shed all pretense of cordiality. Nick suddenly sighed. As expected, the guest said coldly. Nick lay on the chair and looked up at the patterns on the ceiling. His eyes were unfocused as he said, "The Department of Defense wants to merge Stark Industries. They ordered Tawny to hand over the core technology of the Iron Man armor. That's throwing away his family's ancestral grave. The state taking away Stark Industries is probably one of the top 3 things that can anger him. And among the people who can blow up those soldiers, Stark is definitely in the top 3. And this time, he is not fighting alone. He has the support of almost all large companies. There could be many cores of democracy, but the power of the empire belongs to only one place. If the Department of Defense gets the control of Stark and other large arms companies, then the bureaucrats and the system they represent will expand infinitely and eventually include everything. And if Stark wins, then the country will become a huge trust company. All small companies will have no need to exist, because the country is the union of one or several companies." The guest tone was cold and even cruel. This is a war between consortiums and bureaucrats. The middle class is destined to be cannon fodder. Then he asked with a hint of ridicule, "What about Captain America's attitude? Now he is representing the people. He doesn't like either of them, but he has no other choice. This is the most painful struggle I've ever seen him. Both sides are fighting, and he's tearing apart his cherished freedom and rights, but I can already feel his choice." The guest didn't ask the answer that Nick didn't say because there was no need to think about it. Then, civil war is imminent, and it will be the most cruel war. The war will be limited to the smallest scale. Nick replied, "Because we don't dare to start a war at all. Whether the parliament ousts the president or the president dissolves the parliament will determine the future direction of the country. I will do my best to eliminate other interference, and the outcome of everything will be decided by the Avengers. I have obtained the support of the professor and will do my best to ensure that this civil war will not expand. The Asgardians have also expressed their neutrality. Thor and the Hulk will not participate in this war. Now, we still need your support." Nick stood up and looked into the guest's eyes. "Now support or oppose? Control the scope of the civil war." The guest asked, "Why do you have such a crazy idea?" Nick replied firmly, "Because the Avengers have 2 of the best leaders. No matter what their stance is, they will not destroy the whole country. This will inevitably trigger a full-scale response from the Nazis. The Soviet Union, Asgard, and even China may participate." The guest was still reminding Nick of the absurdity of his idea. "This is exactly where our duty lies. I will open up the fairest battlefield for them and keep all interference out of the battlefield. Now that the X-Men support me and SHIELD supports me, I need more power to shelter them from the wind and rain." Nick replied loudly, "What if it is apocalypse?" The guest was not moved by his generosity, but asked the most deadly question. "How do you rule out the influence of apocalypse?" Nick was silent for a long time before he raised his head. "I need your attitude to prove it to you. If you can fight against apocalypse, the Guardians of the Galaxy will support you on behalf of 1/3 of the civilizations in the galaxy." The guest pulled down his hat, revealing the face of an ordinary American. It was the hybrid of Spartoy and human, Star-Lord. Chapter 257. Star-Lord followed Nick to the basement of the S.H.I.E.L.D. base. The sinking elevator ran very smoothly, but the speed was not slow at all. Star-Lord silently timed in his heart until 10 minutes later, the door of the elevator opened. At 1,500 meters, Star-Lord instantly calculated the answer in his heart. This 1,500 meters underground building is composed of alloy, plastic, and carbon fiber materials, and it seems to have a strong ability to adapt to deformation. Star-Lord estimated that if he wanted to threaten such a base, nuclear war, solar storm, biochemical disaster, and world war would be very difficult. At least a meteorite of more than 10 tons would have to hit head-on. The structure of the base is very complex. Most of the passages are closed, and Nick didn't seem to have any intention of showing him around, so Star-Lord had to keep up with Nick's pace resentfully. After passing through several gates that looked very ordinary, but made Star-Lord instinctively feel like there was a light on his back, the two came to a circular laboratory. The laboratory is a huge hollow sphere. According to Star-Lord's perception, this should be the center of the entire underground base. The surrounding walls are made of an elastic metal material that looks like plastic. Star-Lord secretly touched it, and his tentacles felt a soft and slippery force sliding away the pressure he applied. Star-Lord was surprised, so he added a little strength to his hand and secretly brought energy with him. As a result, it was as if he had touched a layer of soft and tough air film, and his fingers were slowly and firmly slid away by the repulsive force. This is an energy-repulsive metal. Nick glanced back at him and passed the meaning of "I see you" with a meaningful look. Seeing that Star-Lord was not embarrassed at all, he continued, "It has a special property that can quickly transmit the pressure when it is under energy pressure. This makes it almost indestructible." "If it's true," Star-Lord looked at him with a surprised face and said, "Why don't you use it as a weapon? You don't look like, you're not that particular person." Its conductivity is related to its scale. An energy-repulsive metal the size of a thumb has similar resistance to energy as ordinary steel, only with enough volume and mass. Its resistance will increase exponentially. Natural prison material. I'm a little curious about what you've locked up here. Star-Lord looked inside through the window of the Circle Laboratory. It was glass made of high-strength materials, with golden veins running through it, and Star-Lord recognized this material. The Asgardians used it to make divine prisons to imprison the most dangerous criminals in the universe. The interior of the Ring Laboratory was a huge, spherical space with a diameter of about 150 meters. It was a huge space surrounded by the Ring Laboratory and other base structures. At the bottom of the space was an extremely powerful anti-gravity device. It suspended a huge metal ball with a diameter of about 80 meters in midair. The same energy-repelling metal cast a huge, almost indestructible prison. "Who are you holding captive here? Slayer Lord? Or Odin?" Star-Lord was stunned. This place uses Asgardian technology and is also one of the best prisons in the universe. If you're locked here, it will definitely be like a nightmare. A terrifying shadow, a nightmare in the universe. Nick obviously didn't want to say anything, but he took Star-Lord on a force field floating disc without mass and slowly drifted towards the air prison. A semicircular hole was sunken in the spherical prison, sucking the two in. Star-Lord finally saw the prisoner in the prison. A slightly child-looking Asian young man, wearing a white researcher's coat, walked between the test tubes and reagents, methodically analyzing data on the test bench. He seemed to be operating 5 or 6 experiments at the same time, and there were 3 researchers next to him, but the tedious experiments that made the assistants flustered were as smooth as flowing water in his hands. Star-Lord, who is proficient in various sophisticated disciplines in the universe, and is also an excellent scientist, suddenly felt the crushing of his IQ. Some formulas and calculations that violated his common sense flashed on the display screen, and other beautiful and symmetrical smooth formulas also slid across the display screen, like angels and demons dancing together. "He is." Star-Lord pointed to the prisoner and suddenly felt like his tongue was tied in a knot, and he couldn't untie it no matter what. The expression on Nick's face changed, and a kind of confusion mixed with fear and anger made the Iron Director look a little embarrassed. He nodded silently. "I don't know if this is a miracle or a conspiracy," And I don't know if this is an opportunity or a trap of the Demon King, but it just appeared like this. In a previous civilization era, in the era of Apocalypse, mutants and humans fought against Apocalypse together, but they were destroyed by the Four Horsemen. The professor has been looking for ways to fight against Apocalypse, but he found that we don't know him at all. Who is he? Where did he come from? What is he going to do? The most feared thing is always the unknown. Nick pointed his finger on the transparent cage and motioned to Star-Lord. In the end, S-H-I-L-D completed him, the Apocalypse clone, the man who calls himself Chun-Ong Impossible. Star-Lord didn't believe Nick's words at all. You can't get the genes of Apocalypse at all, and even if you get them, it's useless. For that kind of existence, they are the mark of life itself. They are the only one. Yes, we can't get the genes of Apocalypse, so we imitate him. What we're doing is not copying an Apocalypse, but imitating the Apocalypse itself. Recreating an Apocalypse is just a disaster, but we can get close to him. Nick replied, through the highest technology of mutants and humans, we can complete this miracle. His genes come from countless mutants, but the most important ones are 3 of them. The atavistic evolver, who has the ability to change genes to adapt to the environment, Darwin. The genetic mimic, who can imitate and change their own genes, and has the most terrifying genetic potential among mutants, the demon woman. The personality copy ability, who can absorb, learn, and imitate other personalities, change their own genes, and obtain other mutants' abilities. A large group. We completed a perfect blank sheet. A large group of imitated personalities of Apocalypse. Just like seeds, we obtained the embryonic form of the Apocalypse personality. And then in this body that can perfectly adapt, imitate, and evolve, we recreated an Apocalypse approximation in order to spy on the secrets of this demon. He is the most perfect human body, and he will definitely be able to reproduce the secrets of Apocalypse from human beings to that kind of existence. He doesn't have any genetic material because he contains all genetic material. He is the conceptual incarnation of mutants and humans. He alone contains all of our existence because he is the human and mutants themselves. You can call him Adam, or you can call him Satan, because he is the son of humanity and the incarnation of the ancient snake. This is S-H-I-E-L-D, plan for Apocalypse, Garden of Eden. Did you succeed? Star-Lord looked at him like he was looking at a madman, like a rhetorical question, but also like a statement. Yes, he had some memories when he was born. Now we know his name, which may also be the name of Apocalypse. Chun-Ong. Nick looked at Chun-Ong with extremely sharp eyes. Maybe you see the shadow of Apocalypse in him, but he is not Apocalypse after all. What can defeat him may not pose a threat to Apocalypse. After all, it used to be the Apocalypse of human beings, and it has long been a different existence from the current Apocalypse. We know, Nick replied calmly. The professor helped us locate the degree of similarity between his personality and the human personality of Apocalypse. Now, it is only 12%. Every time he gets closer to Apocalypse, the similarity will increase a little. When it reaches 100%, he will become the incarnation of Apocalypse, one of his clones, and this change is irreversible. He will instinctively transform towards the personality of Apocalypse. The closer he gets to Apocalypse, the stronger his power will be, and eventually to the point where he can easily destroy us. At that time, Apocalypse will come to him and destroy everything. This is a warning. Yes, this is a warning, but we have no choice. Against Apocalypse, he is our only hope. Nick sighed. The professor told us the secret of how to control the personality of Apocalypse. The key to controlling this personality change is himself. His own personality is like a lock. The stronger he is, the slower the Apocalypse will be. We are using the human personality of Apocalypse to limit the current personality of Apocalypse so that he can still maintain a human posture. What about his current attitude? Star-Lord suddenly turned to ask Nick. Adam, the clone of Apocalypse, has a friendly attitude towards us. His human personality is being rapidly perfected, and we are also helping him perfect it. Nick replied somewhat bitterly. This is not like S.H.I.L.D. style. I would like us to slice and dissect him, but he is not someone we can control, nor is he someone we can offend or provoke. Apocalypse may not be unaware of our plan. Most of the reason why S.H.I.L.D. can successfully implement the Garden of Eden project may be that Apocalypse is also curious about this plan. Come on, I'll show you the consequences of losing control of the plan, Nick said with a sneer. Facing the God who may have created mankind, what kind of terrible consequences will human blasphemy have? The door of the laboratory slid open in front of the two, and Nick's speed was not slow. As one alloy door after another opened in front of Star-Lord, the two began to enter the other side of the base. The closer they got, the more Star-Lord could feel some information revealed by the subtle traces around him. Chapter 258. Star-Lord discovered that the entire underground base is divided into left and right parts, with the road from the entrance to the floating cage as the central axis. Unlike the core area where there are traces of new construction, the right half of the area Nick took him to has obvious traces of long-term use. It seems to be a base that has existed for a long time, but now this base has been destroyed. At first, there were some large metal structures that had been distorted by heavy blows, some doors and walls that were not obviously deformed, and traces of modification could be seen. There were also people working inside. As Nick went deeper, some mottled traces gradually could not be hidden. The distorted door frames, half-melted water pipes, and deformed metal walls. These alloy and concrete wall columns with a thickness of more than 10 centimeters and even tens of centimeters began to show signs of tragic damage. Some broken, twisted, and torn metal frames made Star-Lord feel like a large war had taken place here. Gradually, some more obvious traces appeared in front of Star-Lord. The burned and melted walls, the huge steel bars inserted upside down on the ground, the alloy doors that were slapped into the walls, the torn metal debris, the exposed wires, and the bloodstains sprinkled on the ground and on the walls. A huge gap with a diameter of nearly 10 meters passes through several rooms in front of the two of them, and the hole is like a meteorite crater to the next floor. Walking inside, there's a huge hole. Half of it is the exposed underground base building, and the other half is the underground rock layer. In the center of this hole, where there should have been a building, there is nothing. Did the Avengers come here? Star-Lord was shocked. After saying that, he keenly noticed half of the reddish-gold fragment. He walked over and kicked the metal fragment out. The more he looked at it, the more familiar it seemed. He picked up the remaining half of the metal plate and put on his face. Other than some deformed parts, he found that the rest of the metal plate was just enough to support his face. This was Iron Man's armor mask. Star-Lord put down his armor and said in a tone of sudden realization, "They really came here. This is a fiasco. I almost died here." Nick half squatted in front of a human-shaped pit, gently wiping the dust on the ground with his hand, and said, "That is a painful memory, but what makes you even more painful is that your survival is not because of resistance, nor because of God's blessing, but because the enemy thinks that you are lacking sighting. You know that, and so does the enemy. I've been a devout believer in the gospel of God since I was young. I've doubted, I've been bewitched, and I've even been disdainful. You know how easy it is to lose hope in the world as a special agent. But I've never lost hope. When I discovered the slave tattoo in our genes, I was furious and humiliated. I even gave up on myself and wanted to deny the sanctity of the Bible. I wanted to acknowledge science and pick up the weapons of freedom, equality, and science. That way, I would have a reason to fight against God. I didn't want to acknowledge that the high and mighty person who regarded us as ants was God. Maybe God is just using him to create, bless, and punish humans? But only when you get close to him will you feel despair. Only then will you truly be sure that he is the one who could destroy your faith, a living proof, a Satan. I don't believe in God. Star-Lord raised his head and said, "I'm sorry, but my dad is an alien. God doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. There is no made by Skynet in my genes. I have seen many real gods, and they only make me feel awe for their power. So, I don't understand these things. One day you will, just based on the human half of you. Nick clapped his hands and turned his head to the other side. Don't you want to see how the disaster happens? Then come on. Star-Lord and he came to a small room, and on the other side was a larger office. The people inside were busy in front of the computer, making the most detailed gaps in some videos. They checked some inexplicable videos frame by frame. When Star-Lord turned around, Nick had already turned on the projector on their heads. On the opposite light screen was a laboratory surrounding the culture nest. A group of white coats were running around, shouting silently at the screen. Inside the culture tank, there was a humanoid shadow. In fact, Adam is our second clone. There is an earlier blank clone before him, code 666. He is a clone that we cultivated with a large group of residual primordial stem cells, which contains the memories of a large group of people trying to simulate the apocalypse personality. Unlike the composite clone that has been cultivated many times now, the mutant genes in his body are very active. If we want to plant a seed now, then at that time, we wanted to make a mirror that reflects the apocalypse personality, a mirror that restores the apocalypse. We thought we could control him. Where did you get this kind of confidence? Star-Lord said sarcastically. Nick did not answer, but controlled the screen to skip to the next video. The Oriental young man in the video looked exactly the same as the one Star-Lord saw in the core area. The researcher in the video wanted to draw a tube of his blood. The young man just changed to a more comfortable sitting position, and the researcher blocked in front of the camera as if he was drawing the young man's blood. Nick paused the video. Unlike what we thought, 666 did not show any hostile emotions. Some generals thought he was hiding, but later we discovered that the newly born clone evaluated us with an absolutely objective attitude. No positive, no negative, an impartial and fair attitude. Because his personality has just been born and his memory does not carry emotions, he will only determine his position according to our attitude. The first change was when we tried to control him, which represented he was partially released and his personality took a step in the direction of apocalypse. He has a reason to control us. In 3 hours, he learned to crack our control chip. That was developed by Tony Stark. When the researchers tried to hurt him, he learned hypnosis, how to scientifically control a person from a physiological and psychological perspective. You see, from this moment on, all the researchers who have been close to him are controlled. Some are completely controlled. Some are just psychological suggestions. When drawing blood, this researcher blocked the monitor and drew a tube from his arm. The video jumped to the next section. This time there was no clone 666, but the researcher Star-Lord had just seen on the video. In a laboratory, the researcher separated a substance from a tube of blood under the camera, making a tube of transparent reagent instantly turn violet. This color is as clear as the sky and gorgeous as petals and butterflies. Violet, the name of this potion, comes from its color. We suspect that it was separated from 660 SIXS blood. Although we don't know how he instilled that difficult knowledge into his control targets, we are sure that Dr. Allen, who made this potion, was not simply hypnotized. He was domesticated. Just like humans control dogs, he was controlled and domesticated. So our psychiatrists couldn't find anything wrong. When others were suspected, they were all injected with violet. The potion developed their brains. At that time, each of them was the best psychiatrist and hypnotist. Damn, what did the report say? Everything was normal, but the doctor's pupils were a little blue. Nick swore fiercely. By that time, violet had already begun to spread in the base, and 666 was even more like the master here than I was. They nibbled away at the entire base bit by bit, except for some S isolation system. 666 could do whatever he wanted in other places. At that time, their experimental progress was very smooth. Not only 660 SXS Project Eden, but also other confidential and even top-secret projects all went smoothly. I thought they were enlightened. I didn't expect them to change the lab supervisor and the host of the experiment. Do you believe it? At that time, it was 666 who was presiding over us experiments, and he even presided over us to study his own projects.